The regular meeting of the Administrative Appeals Board for January 25th, 2023 to order. Board Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Board Member Vasily,
Here.
Board Member Hedrick,
Here.
Board Member Moses.
Here.
Board Member Sinclair,
Here.
Vice Chair King. Here. And Chair Michael Panessa.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you. Our first item is the acceptance of the agenda. The board can discuss and may amend the order of the agenda. I would like to entertain a motion and a second for acceptance of the agenda.
I move the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you. Board Secretary, can you call a vote?
Board Member Moses,
Yeah, aye.
Board Member Vasily,
Aye.
Board Member Sinclair,
Aye.
Vice Chair King. And Michael Panessa.
Aye.
5-0 carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This time is set aside for members of the public to address this board on items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of this board. 3 minutes will be assigned to each speaker, and although the board does value your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, the board generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. Testimony for the hearings will only be taken at the time of each hearing. Board Secretary, can you begin the public comment period?
All members have signed the oath affidavit.
Okay, do we have anybody that wanted to just to speak in general?
Not that I'm aware of all the
Okay.
cases.
All right, thank you. Then we will move into our first case. It's number 3 on the agenda. It is the appeal of the administrative fine of $5,000 concerning reefer madness for a violation of code 5.55.205 A2 and code 5.55110. Board Secretary, can you confirm that we have signed affidavits to ensure that the city staff and the appellant understand that their testimony is under oath?
We did.
Thank you very much, Chair and board members. Pat Donovan on behalf of the city. So the city's presentation tonight is going to consist of comments from myself and Officer Mitch. Should the chair and board member feel the need to interrupt, ask any questions, feel free to do so either during or at the end. Does not matter to us. So before you tonight is the appeal of the citation issued to Reefer Madness LLC for a violation of the city's municipal code as articulated by the chair. Contrary to the appellant's assertions in its appeal, what the facts will show is that city's code enforcement was patient, professional, and entirely transparent with the appellant about a specific violation that, based on inspections from Officer Mitch, went unresolved for over 5 months. What was this violation? It was a foundational requirement that dispensaries keep cannabis goods in secured and locked room, safe, or vault in a manner to prevent diversion and theft. Further, these areas are delimited so that only authorized dispensary personnel can access them. This requirement is clearly found in the city's municipal code. Compliance with any minimum state regulation is not sufficient. That's not why we're here tonight. It is clear the city can impose additional security requirements on dispensaries than the state. In fact, we can ban them entirely if the city so chooses. Now, in the appellant's documents, there are numerous allegations about multiple red herrings. What I'm going to focus on, though, is the specific citation as articulated by the chair and as stated in the staff report. Officer Mitch is here to get into some more granular detail, but the overview is as follows. February 2nd, 2022. Officer Mitch conducts what he calls an on-site baseline inspection of the appellant's business with the owner. The purpose of this was not punitive. It was not a gotcha to get you on some minor technicality. Rather, it was meant as an inspection for Officer Mitch to go through the business, educate the business owner, say, hey, we have some issues here, and most importantly, give them a chance to fix it. As part of this inspection, Officer Mitch noted, among other issues, this very issue before you tonight, the improper storage of the cannabis. The following day, city staff sent a follow-up email confirming this, explaining, please resolve these issues. On March 15th, so a little more than a month later, 2022, Officer Mitch conducts a follow-up inspection. Credit must be given where credit is due. Some of the issues were resolved. However, what was not resolved, of course, was the issue before you tonight. Over 4 months later, July 20th, Officer Mitch once again has another inspection of the business. And once again, the issue with a secure inventory storage area remains unresolved. This same day, Officer Mitch issues the citation before you. Mere hours later, the appellant fixes it. So now I'm going to turn it over to Officer Mitch, who will go into a bit more granular detail between those interactions. So Officer Mitch, come on up.
Is that microphone on? We're having trouble hearing back here.
It is,
Can you hear me?
yes.
No, hit the green light. There you go.
Can you hear me now? So good evening, members of the board, fellow city staff, and members of the public joining us here for tonight's hearing. My name is Mitch Napan, and I'm a co-compliance supervisor for the city of Palm Springs. So the following are the related events and details that led to the eventual issuance of administrative citation AD 6003 to Reefer Bandits LLC. On Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022, I conducted an on-site cannabis compliance inspection that included a full audit of the business operating practices to check for compliance with all applicable state and local adult use cannabis related business operating requirements. The purpose of this inspection, like Pat mentioned, was to create a baseline of how the business was currently operating in accordance with all state and local regulations, identify items that were not in compliance, and provide guidance on how to correct items identified that were out of compliance. Should be noted that this sort of baseline compliance inspection was completed at every operating cannabis dispensary throughout February and the beginning of March, which was shortly after my role shifted as the primary cannabis enforcement officer in January of 2022. The inspection was facilitated by the business owner, Stephen Leotic, and a copy of my findings can be found in the staff report. I believe it's attachment 4. Upon completion of the inspection checklist, I debriefed my findings with Mr. Leotic and discussed the items that were found to be out of compliance, which included out of compliance findings related to the video surveillance system, inventory being stored within the retail sales floor and back office areas, and not locked in a safe room, safe, or vault, and not having a limited access area established, and discussed ways to get them corrected. We also discussed other cannabis compliance related topics that were not part of the inspection checklist that Mr. Leotic had questions about, which required some additional review of the regulations by myself, along with the specifics related to the inventory storage area. And I responded in the form of a follow-up email sent the next day to Mr. Leotic, which is also shown in the staff report. Before leaving the business, I advised Mr. Leotic that I would be circling back the following month to recheck for compliance, and that items found on this initial inspection should be corrected as soon as possible, but at least by the time I circle back. On March 15th, 2022, I conducted a follow-up on-site inspection to check for compliance with the items that were identified as needing to be corrected from the previous operational audit. This was again facilitated by the business owner, Stephen Leotic. Mr. Leotic detailed the corrections made to the video surveillance system and the installation of a locking mechanism to secure the limited access area. He also stated that he had procured materials to create a locked safe room for inventory storage, but was awaiting a part that was left out of the original shipment of the materials, so that item remained out of compliance, but was expected to be corrected not long after. I was satisfied with the progress that had been made from my previous visit, as well as the information provided about the progress towards the correction of the inventory storage area. So there was no enforcement action taken at that time, but Mr. Leotic was reminded that the item remained out of compliance and should be promptly corrected. On July 20th, 2022, conducted an on-site cannabis compliance inspection that was accompanied by a supervisor at the business, Gustavo Flores. That included an audit of the business's operating practices to check for compliance with all applicable state and local adult use cannabis related business operating requirements. During this inspection, it was found that the corrections needed to the inventory storage area, as detailed in my prior visits, remained outstanding and the limited access areas were being left unsecured. Before the completion of the inspection, the business owner arrived, and I was able to discuss my findings and ask why the corrections to the inventory storage area hadn't been made. Mr. Leotic stated that when the items that were to be used to create the locked safe room were delivered, one of the parts was never shipped with it, and that they had just been waiting for them to have it installed. I advised Mr. Leotic that I would review my findings with my director, Veronica Goodhart, but that this would more than likely result in enforcement action, as this is an item that the city categorizes as a serious violation within the cannabis ordinance, and has been knowingly out of compliance for at least 5 months. Upon further review with Director Goodhart, it was decided that reasonable attempts have been made to gain compliance, and since the business continued to operate in violation, enforcement action should be taken. On July 21st, 2022, the next day, I drafted the notice of violation letter, seen in the staff report, an administrative citation 86003. And I delivered it in person along with my colleague, Code Officer Christy Smith, at the business to the business owner. I briefly discussed the details of the notice of violation and the citation with Mr. Weodick, and advised that while the letter calls for immediate correction, it would be effective as the end of business that day. I also advised them that should the business operate beyond that day without first making required corrections, they would be subject to additional administrative penalties for each day and would be subject to an immediate suspension of their operating permit. On Friday, July 22nd, 2022, at 12:01 a.m., I received an email from Mr. Weodick stating that the cage was installed and included an image of the installation. While Fridays were regularly my scheduled days off at the time, I replied later that morning and arranged to come down to the business and inspect the area just before the business's regularly scheduled opening to accommodate as little disruption as possible to the business's customers or staff. I arrived at the business at 7:50 a.m. along with Code Officer Christy Smith, and found that the cage that was installed satisfied the correction that needed to be made and create a locked safe room for the storage of the business's cannabis products that was not being used for display, samples, or for immediate sales. Communicating my findings to Mr. Weodick, advised that the outstanding violation is now considered resolved. So that'll complete what I have present. So I'll pass it back to Pat, and I'll be available should board members have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Officer Mitch. And I'll conclude with this, Chair.
Can you move your microphone a little closer to you, please? Thank
Is
you
that better?
much.
So I'll conclude with this. The city is not draconian. We're not looking to catch permittees on a minor technicality. Further, this violation is not a complicated odor control system that requires super technical work and tweaks depending on the weather, the humidity, etc. Nor is it a nefarious hack of their purchase and sale system that causes some type of, arrears in the tax. This is a foundational requirement. Keep your inventory secure, keep it locked, and only let those people who are supposed to have access to it have access to it. That's it. I won't bore you with every single reason why this is in the city's cannabis ordinance. Only that, plainly, the city doesn't want large unsecured quantities of valuable product clearly accessible to anyone that walks in and they can see it. Further, as it pertains to the city's actions in this case, I think it's clear that the city's goal here was compliance. We realize that the industry is heavily regulated. Evidence of this is Officer Mitch's efforts throughout this 5 months, and then even on his day off to go and inspect and make sure the business didn't lose any days open. We inspected, we educated, we waited, and it was only upon the issuance of a citation did the issue get resolved. City would have loved for February of 2022, 5 months earlier, business had the inspection, gets its report, says, don't worry about it, we fixed it. That would have been great. Unfortunately, in this case, that's not what's occurred. And after enough time and enough chances are given, there must be further enforcement action, or else the city's enforcement regime basically rendered meaningless. So that concludes my report. And as Officer Mitch said, myself and him are available for any questions.
All right, thank you. So at this point, we'll open it up to questions to the city from the board members. Why don't we start with Vice Chair King?
Just really one question. So the citation was issued for the storage and access areas, not the balance of other things that were on the checklist, right? That we've read about in the autonomous deal. Is that correct?
That is correct. The citation was issued specifically. The short answer to your question is yes. I can go longer if you would.
No, there's just two like code sections that are referred to, and I see 205A2 refers to storage. I don't know, 55.110. Seems like it's a generic sort of section that just said follow the rule.
Correct. I would say that is accurate. That 5.55.110 is kind of a catch-all. You are right. It is a generic. All the rules you must follow. The specific code citation or the specific violation in this instance is, of course, 55 Excuse me, 5.55.205A2.
the A2, so. That's what's on the board today.
Correct.
That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair.
Sure. Mitch, was this the first inspection ever for this facility?
So I've been at the facility prior to, as a supportive role to, an officer, Fernando Gomez, who we were at the facility shortly after they opened. I think it was just prior to the issuance of their operating certificate. This was the first, real inspection, while I was serving in my role as the city's primary cannabis enforcement officer. And this was really the first time that the city's code compliance division had dedicated resources to, really knowing what the cannabis ordinance rules are and taking enforcement direction. Prior to that, we didn't have the staff, in addition to the enforcement of the vacation rental program and the emergency declaration, to have any dedicated staff. So we did have an officer that had some familiarity with the cannabis program, but nobody that was, again, had the expertise to kind of go in and do full compliance inspection. So that was my role, beginning around the middle of January. I moved into that where I focused primarily on cannabis, understanding the city's cannabis ordinance, the state regulations, developing an inspection checklist, and really getting out there and starting the educational campaign with our local licensees. And it started at the dispensary level, then I moved into the distribution and the manufacturing and cultivation level.
If all would have been well in your opinion, when will your next inspection, and how often do you inspect?
So the goal when I started was to do quarterly drop-in inspections. The larger goal was that the full operational audits were to be done annually at the time of the license renewal.
And we're talking about a lock in a limited access area.
So specifically, what the business was cited for was for how they were storing their cannabis inventory that was not on display. So cannabis dispensaries, a certain amount of products are allowed to be on display for immediate sales, and then the bulk of their back inventory is required to be in a locked safe room, safer vault. And so with this business, they did not have that locked safe room, safer vault established where they were storing their back inventory.
So your March 15th visit, seeing that what you had suggested hadn't been corrected, was it the same thing that wasn't corrected on your July 20th visit?
Correct, one of them, yes. I believe there's 4 items that were identified in that initial baseline inspection. And then the only one that remained outstanding at the time of the reinspection was the cannabis inventory storage area.
And the story was that they didn't have the part.
Correct. So they procured, it was a system where it was going to create a cage barrier, which would have blocked off the portion of their storage room where they were keeping their inventory. They procured those materials, but I think it was like an elbow joint screw that actually attaches to the wall was not included in that delivery. So that's what they were waiting for.
Have you had an opportunity to look through the appellant's book on his feeling that you were guilty of malfeasance and misfeasance?
I did review what was submitted by the
And
yes.
do you have any comment on some of those allegations?
I think I don't have comment. No, I mean, I think what Pat had mentioned, I think a lot of it's a lot of information. Cannabis is a highly regulated industry. What the business was specifically cited for was this one area. And there's a lot of information in there that, I can't speak to what the appellant's intentions are, but it's quite robust.
Pat, you mentioned that occasionally there are additional regulations allowed to be put in by compliance or by the city.
Correct, by the city. My point there being is that the state has its own regulatory regime.
Right.
We as the city are allowed to go beyond that. We can't go below it. We can't be in conflict with it, but what we can do is require more stringent.
So did the city have more stringent regulations
Absolutely.
that would be germane to this
Absolutely,
situation?
it's 5.55.205A2. I won't read the entire section, but the gist of it is that all cannabis must be stored in a secured and locked safe room, safe or vault. And then, of course, these areas are only accessible to those authorized. And that second part is also important, that not every member or employee at the dispensary should have full access to the entire inventory.
Does the city keep a list of those who are authorized? How do you know who's authorized?
So the city maintains an employee roster, but we don't keep track of which individuals have specific authorization. Generally, when we're doing our drop-in inspections, on-site inspections, as part of the relationships that we build with the business owners, it's best practices often communicated that managers, supervisors on the floor generally have access to inventory stored. Now, that's not the same for every single business. Some business, most of their employees, I think there's a couple that their employees do have access to it because that's how they fulfill their orders. Other businesses have it restricted to strictly, shift managers or supervisors and above.
All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hedrick.
Just one question. So when the initial permit was issued, was the place inspected?
So there were a number of inspections that were completed by the building department, by our police department, by fire. Code compliance at that time did not conduct an operational inspection, which covered the scope of what was created in January of 2022 that I conducted at this business in February of 2022.
But it seems like having this cage would be a major issue to begin with, correct? I mean, I can understand other minor things slipping through because the police department, code, whatever. But the cage seems like a major issue. And so the permit was issued without the cage being there, is that correct?
I mean, so correct, and the cage was just, and Officer Mitch, you can interrupt me. That was just the solution to the issue that we found. The city does not mandate you must have a cage, this cage, or, we basically try to allow some business flexibility that says, hey, as long as you comply with the municipal code, you can do it kind of how you see fit. Does that mean you have a giant room and build a cage? You have a dedicated off, throw up some drywall, put a room over there. It's really up to the business operator. We don't get to that granular level of detail to say you must have a cage.
But it would seem like when you issue the initial permit, this would be a major item. They would have to show you, where are you storing your inventory?
So within the cannabis license application, there's a site diagram that's provided to both the state and the city. The inspections that occur are all done pre-operational. It's in the application process to obtain their certificate of occupancy. So the last inspection was done by the police department was a security plan inspection. And again, this was done before there was any cannabis product within the facility. And that was a inspection, I believe, was done by Lieutenant Villegas. And it was a walkthrough of the surveillance system, it was a walkthrough of lighting, entrances, exits, and it dealt specifically with things related to the security plan. So it was very informal. It didn't have, there were items that the police kind of goes through, but there wasn't a formal inspection checklist. And again, that was done prior to the business would have been allowed to have any product on site. So within the site diagram for this particular business, I believe it's included in the staff report, they have that whole back area that's sectioned off by wooden barn doors as their limited access area is what it had established. At the time of my first inspection in February 2nd, those barn doors did not have a lock. So there was no locking mechanism as required to establish those. So again, at the time of the last inspection prior to mine in February 2022, that was not noticed because the business wasn't operational. So they went by the site diagram, they were led on a walkthrough by the business owner or their representative, and they were looking at very specific things.
So would a simple going to Home Depot or wherever and buying a double lock system, would that been satisfactory to the city?
So in creating limited access area, there's a requirement to have commercial grade lock. And so that was one of the things that was mentioned that the business owner did correct upon my reinspection in March. The portion that they didn't correct is that within the regulations, there's a requirement that any place where cannabis inventory is stored has to be stored separate from any employee break room areas. And so that one area that was separated by the barn doors, which previously didn't have a lock. They installed a lock that created that whole area as a limited access area, but it was a one for all. And so there is, the additional requirement that's mentioned, which the business was ultimately cited for. It's also mentioned within the state's regulations where it requires a separate locked safe room or vault for anywhere where you're storing cannabis inventory. So you have to have an established limited access area that's only available to authorized persons. And you have to have an area where you're storing your cannabis inventory that is locked, secure, and is separate from any employee changing or any other employee changing areas or break rooms, which they did not have when they installed that lock on the door.
Thank you.
Mr. Moses?
I think I understand the city's case. And I don't think I want to ask any questions yet until I've heard the appellant's case.
All right, thank you, Mr. Basili.
No questions.
Okay, so I do have a couple. So your inspections, are they scheduled or are they drop in?
They are mostly unannounced drop-in inspections.
Okay, and the various times you were visiting this, though, those were all again unscheduled drop-in.
Correct.
Okay. Starting with January, then February or March into July.
We'll start in February. Correct.
February, okay, all right. And then as a result of the citation, this is a fine. The business wasn't shut down for not.
Correct. So the communication was generally it would come with immediate correction for a serious violation. The city has 3 categories of violation. There's minor, moderate, and serious. So it comes with immediate correction. So I communicated with the business owner that they would have until end of business day. And then if they were to continue to operate the next day in violation, if they hadn't corrected it, they'd be subject to additional fines. It'd be considered a separate event. And then at that point, they could possibly receive a suspension of their operating permit.
If it progressed.
Correct. If they would
To
open the
some
next
period of
day
time.
without it being corrected, they would have been issued an additional citation and a suspension of their operating permit.
Okay. And then, I guess, as a follow-up to Mr. Hedrick's question, from what you were stating, they were waiting on a piece that would attach, like if we're looking at the materials, it looks like a cage to attach that to the floor or see at the wall, whatever.
Correct.
Okay, and I guess your question maybe made me think of this. Is that not a piece that is readily available?
Again, I'm not familiar with the supplier that they procured this from. This was done. That'd be a better question for the business owner to answer.
Okay, okay. And then my last question is, in your role as kind of the primary inspector for cannabis businesses, is this a typical infraction? Is this a rare infraction?
So, I mean, this is a rare infraction. Most of the, if not all of the other licensed dispensaries as a result of their baseline inspections had established and secured inventory storage rooms that met the requirements of the city's regulations. But again, almost every other dispensary that I went to during this period of doing my baseline inspections, there were things that were found out of compliance. There's only 2 dispensaries that didn't have any findings within my entire inspection checklist. And again, part of that was these businesses have been operating for upwards of 2 years. And the cannabis industry is highly regulated at a state level, and it's quite restricted at a city level. And so it is complicated to go through. And that's why it was important to have somebody in role, which I was eventually moved into, that we just couldn't accommodate from the code compliance division. We had staff that was available in the Office of Special Programs. So Veronica had a huge hand in writing the cannabis ordinance. She was available to answer as kind of a resource. And we had some other office admin staff that had some basic familiarity with the application process and some of the operating requirements, but we didn't really have anybody that was strictly dedicated, other than Veronica, for the operating requirements. And again, that was something that Director Goodhart pushed for many months to get somebody into that role. And, eventually I was moved into there in January.
Okay, and from a timing standpoint, when you did your last inspection, before, so you issued a citation, and it wasn't until the citation was issued that then that issue was resolved.
Correct. So that inspection was on July 20th, which I believe was Wednesday. I issued the notice of violation that following day, was a Thursday and 21st. And then, within hours, which again, I got an email on technically the 22nd, but it was at 12:01 PM, Thursday night going into Friday, that correction had been made. And so again, there was no disruption to the business's operating practices. They didn't have to shut the doors and lose any business while they got this resolved. But yes, it wasn't until that citation was issued that, there was, it was prioritized to get done. So,
All right, thank you.
I just want,
Please.
I want just clarification since you brought it up. Do you expect that there's like 30 or more, right, retail stores in Palm Springs, correct?
Yeah, 29. There was licenses, there was like 33 at the time,
Mm.
but some of them were closed for renovations. I think it was like 29. operating
29.
locations.
And so you did this in that January, February, March.
Between February and the end of March.
And that was like the first time in your role that you'd like stepped in with a checklist.
Correct,
Okay,
for cannabis.
and you said that you found violations, big and small, or whatever, in almost all of them.
Yes,
And then it was clear, right, that there was some confusion or just learning curve, right, around what are all the things, because there's a lot of things. And we know compliance is really important in cannabis, but also these guys took a really long time to get open, I know, in a lot of cases, and yeah, the rules in the state level change every year. Correct?
I don't know if they change I know there was a period of some change of some consolidation. But
They do change every year, I'll tell you.
I know they changed, I think they changed 3 or 4 times
And,
last year.
and even you're still learning, because I'm still learning,
Of course,
we're all still learning. Okay, but I wanted to sort of clarify that there was like nobody that came through with flying colors, maybe one,
I think it was 2.
two. Okay, gotcha, thanks.
All right, anything further from the city?
No, Chair.
All right, at this time, I'd like to open the appeal hearing. The appellant will be invited to speak for up to 10 minutes. Any members of the public who wish to speak on this appeal hearing shall have up to 3 minutes to speak. If a member of the public testifies, the appellant will be invited to provide a rebuttal for up to 2 additional minutes. Board Secretary, could you begin the public testimony period?
We do have signed affidavits for anybody in person, anyone on Zoom is there to testify in the appeal hearing. Under the laws of perjury, if you choose to speak, you hereby accept and acknowledge that your testimony shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Are public comments first or following? I'm confused.
The public comments were in the beginning.
Well, on this case.
Are you wanting to speak on this case?
Two on the agenda,
But
on this case, it's after the appellant, right?
I believe that's correct. So you will have your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, board members and staff. Is that better?
Yes.
My name is Stephen Viatic. I'm the owner of Reefer Madness. I put together an extensive report, which I hope that all of you have had a chance to review. It covers all the details surrounding the citation and demonstrates why the citation was issued in error. Page 4 of the staff report says that staff finds, despite multiple attempts to gain compliance via education, the business is in violation and proceeded to issue the citation. The claims about educating us are false. I've done everything code enforcement asked for as quickly as possible, as shown in my report, even though it was not required because the floor plan had already been approved by all city departments in January and February of 2020. The city departments included building, fire, planning, engineering, and police. These sign-offs are shown in Exhibit N. On March 12th, 2020, prior to opening the shop for the first time, Officer Naban and 2 other officers inspected and approved the floor plan. The pre-opening inspection with Officer Naban was a proactive inspection that I requested on March 5th because I wanted to be sure we were doing everything the right way. The approved floor plan is shown in Exhibit H. Exhibit B shows the email to Officer Nabhan demonstrating commercial locks that I installed on the door separately, separating the safe room from the area behind the counters. This was installed on February 2nd, the same day that Officer Nabhan requested it. In his email reply, he states, "I saw that you installed a lock on the door to the safe room. Thank you for getting that done so quickly, as that was an important fix," end quote. Then he went on to say, quote, you had mentioned the idea of installing a cage barrier into the inventory storage space. That may be the way to go too," end quote. So since he seemed to like my idea about upgrading the back room even further, I created exactly that, a cage, and I was cited the same day that I completed it. This is no ordinary cage. This is an all-field security barrier. It's heavy duty. It came from an industrial supplier, Granger. The Exhibit D and Q show the cage. Now, it's important to note here that I was never provided a deadline for this additional suggested upgrade. I was also never provided any letter explaining that I was out of compliance. A code enforcement process, a normal code enforcement process would be to provide a letter and a timeline for correction. I never received a letter, which leads to my next point. The staff report states falsely on page 2 that a timeline for correction and reinspection was established. Where is the timeline? There wasn't one. The only notice of violation I received was the notice that came with the fine, which was delivered the same day I completed the cage, and the notice is dated as such. Exhibit C contains details and photographs concerning the exact status of the upgrade on July 20th, which was sent to Officer Nabhan. There were missing parts, and I had to engineer and improvise extensively. Exhibit D contains the email I sent to Officer Nabhan the night of July 21st, showing the cage was complete, and his reply wanting to reinspect at 7:50 a.m. He reinspected that morning, and he found no issues whatsoever. Again, it's important to note that the cage was completed the same day as the notice of violation. It's important to note attachment 6 of the staff report also contains some serious false allegations unrelated to the citation that seem to set us up for another citation. For example, on the July 20th inspection report, it states yes next to alcohol and tobacco products on site. I inquired about this allegation to Officer Nabhan on December 20th, and in an email reply, he states falsely that there was alcohol in my staff possession during the inspection. This story is false, and I was there for the inspection. There's no evidence in his report to support it, and if you study my exhibits ZA through ZC in my report, you will see that this allegation is false. Page 2 of the staff report says, prior to issuance of citations, code enforcement staff provided in-person outreach and warnings to cannabis businesses advising of violations. The only in-person outreach I received was trickery, not warnings. Going back to page 4 of the staff report, it says they were attempting to gain compliance via education. If this was true, why were the inspection reports in attachment 4 and 6 never shared with me until the publishing of the staff report prior to the November Administrative Appeals Board meeting when this was originally scheduled? Had I not appealed this citation, I would never have known about the false allegation in the inspection report. The attachment 6 of the staff report contains a photo taken by Officer Nabhan from the customer's point of view, which appears to be showing that the door to the storage room is left partially open. Officer Nabhan's photo does not tell the full story. Officer Nabhan had requested a bud tender retrieve Gustavo from the storage room. The door was momentarily open as the bud tender passed through to retrieve Gustavo. Once the bud tender cleared the threshold and was not visible from Officer Nabhan's position, Nabhan took a photo of the momentarily open door. The door was momentarily open because one of my staff had just passed through the threshold, followed by other staff, and they were in the process of closing the door. The door was closed in 36 seconds or less. There were 6 staff plus a security guard on duty at the time. It is also important to note that there were staff actively working in the storage room at that time. From several different security angles shown in Exhibit G, it appears that Officer Nabhan took the photo quickly and discreetly while all my staff in the vicinity were facing the other way. It is important to note the layout of the store here as well. No customer would be able to climb the counter shown and get to the back room, especially since my staff is behind the counter and security is in front of the counter. The cited violation reads, stored cannabis products not kept in a secured and locked safe room, safe or vault. We do have a secure and locked safe room where products are stored. Our back room is a safe room that has 2 consecutive locking doors to get inside. Nowhere in the code does it say does it say our safe room has to have 2 consecutive locking doors to get into the safe room? And that's what I created. I've gone above and beyond the expectation of a secured and locked safe room. And these upgrades have been later construed to look like they were required to bring compliance, when in fact we were already in compliance. We take security seriously at Reefer Madness. Exhibit M shows the layout. We require at least 2 staff behind the counter at all times, plus a security guard on site. We also have a supervisor and buyer stationed in the room, continuously preparing products for sale. If someone were to attempt to climb over the sales counter, they would be deterred by the security guard as well as staff behind the counter. If a person managed somehow to climb over the counter, and if they then somehow got through the locked door into the back room, they would be intercepted by the buyer and supervisor working in the back room, who have immediate access to panic buttons to alert police of a holdup. It is important to note that the retail counter arrangement on its own limits access to the back area. We have cameras covering every inch of the shop as well as the exterior and the parking areas. Staff and security continuously monitor activities from the 65-inch security monitor. There are panic buttons accessible to staff from behind the counter and in the back room, and if the panic button is pressed, it will immediately dispatch police. The back room is a storage room, not a break room. We are not required to have a break room because we are a 1,700 square foot area, and our occupancy rating is only 23 people. We have a separate lounge with walls and doors, and staff may take breaks in the lounge. They can also take breaks in the sales area. The rules governing this are shown in Exhibit I. Concerning bathrooms, customers only have access to a community bathroom, which is just outside the store and serves customers for the whole site. Also, I'd like to mention, we don't have a changing area. It's not required. I think that came up. On pages 5 through 8 of my report, I detailed all the codes and definitions related to this citation and demonstrated how we are not in violation of any. I asked that the appeals board please dismiss this citation. The citation is issued in error. I've spent sleepless nights, time, money, and effort preparing this report so that it is valid and clear to defend myself against the citation that should have never been issued at all. I put basically my entire life savings into starting this business during COVID. According to the citation, a second violation can result in a 6-month suspension, a period long enough to put a small business like Reefer Madness out of business. I have 13 employees and Reefer Madness is their livelihood. And this citation could causes unnecessary stress on them too. I've lost many nights of sleep due to this citation and situation, but I remain hopeful because I know that this citation is not how Palm Springs intends to operate. Thank you. And I'm available for questions.
All right, why don't we go in reverse order? Mr. Basili,
No questions.
Mr. Moses.
Well, I want to hear at some point from the city what's wrong with that statement.
Can you turn your
Whether
mic
this
on?
is the time to ask that question
Thank you.
or not.
The city will have an opportunity to respond. Do you have any questions for the appellant though?
Well, my specific question is, his testimony sounds logical and acceptable. So where is it not so? Where is it, what's the flaw in that the city would be pursuing? That's at the right time, it may be now and it may not be.
Okay, so at this point, we're asking questions to the appellant. The city will have an opportunity to respond and then definitely address your question.
Is there public testimony?
Pardon me?
Is there
Yeah,
public
yeah, there
testimony?
will.
There will be.
Yeah.
Mr. Hedrick?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Sinclair?
The issue here is whether this area was locked, and you mentioned that you were already in compliance. If you were already in compliance, why did you put the lock on that was required by the compliance department on the day of July 21st? If you were already in compliance, why did you need to do that?
Okay, so March 12th of 2020, I requested a proactive code inspection from the Department of Special Programs prior to opening, because I opened several days later. Officer Nabhan came to that meeting, and there were 2 other code enforcement officers, and at that time, and still, the sales counters alone prevent, they cause, it's like a blockade a customer cannot get through to the back room. And at that time, what we had was a curtain. I believe Officer Nabon earlier said that there was a barn door there and there wasn't a lock. The barn door wasn't even there yet. I put the barn door in summer of 2021, and I did that for aesthetics and to make it so customers couldn't see the area through a curtain or anything like that. It wasn't until February 2nd, the February 2nd inspection with Officer Nabon, that he requested a lock on that barn door. And it is a commercial lock that I installed. And I heard some discussion about whether it's commercial or not. It is a commercial lock that I installed. I did it the same day. As soon as Officer Nabon left, I went to Home Depot, I purchased it, I installed it myself.
What did you install on the 20th of February, or of July, or 21st? That pleased Officer Nabon.
That was the cage to the back room. And I believe,
And isn't that what the citation was for? Had nothing to do with alcohol, or whether a door was open or not open, or the front door, or the restrooms. It had to do with whether that piece had been put in, and that's why he issued the violation. Am I wrong?
the citation was for allegedly not having a secure and locked safe room, safer vault.
But the correct, was it not to get that piece that you installed on July 20th?
So in my opinion, when
Yes or no?
I'm not sure I understand.
The piece you installed on July 20th, why did you do that? Was it not to comply with Officer Nabon's requirement or the code's requirement that this place be locked?
So what I did on July 20th is I installed, and I detailed it in emails to Officer Nabon. I began installation of the cage without the 90-degree fasteners that were required as part of the kit. What I ended up doing is going to Home Depot and using 2x4s instead of the steel posts that were a part of the kit. I had to add wood to it, wood and screws to secure the ends. Now, that's not as good as the metal fasteners, which are shown in the exhibits. I can direct you to that exhibit. It's a 90-degree fastener.
But be that as it may, if you'd have done it on February 23rd, we wouldn't be here, correct?
I didn't even have the cage. So when Officer Nabon did his follow-up
What
inspection
was he telling you to put a lock on then, if you didn't have the cage then?
on the doors into that area. So the doors alone, in my opinion, make it a secure storage area.
Yeah.
And so in my opinion, February 2nd, when I installed that, it was secure and locked.
So what were you in violation of on February 23rd?
I don't believe I was in violation of anything.
So why did you make an effort?
He said that,
He
said that it would be good too.
Let me finish. Be in
Sorry.
compliance on July 20th. Why did you do that?
because in his words, he said that would be good too. I can read you exactly what
If
he
you
said.
hadn't done that, would he have put you now in compliance
If I hadn't done that,
on July 20th?
then with the information that I learned on July 20th, he gave me a citation. He gave me a citation because it wasn't finished. I was waiting on the part.
See, you're confusing me because if you're waiting on a part and you fixed it on the 21st or the 20th, it wasn't in compliance before that.
May I? Try,
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna try. Just because I think like it's important to be clear about your understanding or what I'm hearing, your expectations. And then possibly, right, the cities or the officers' expectations and then communication. So what I'm hearing is there was a bunch of different inspections, right? Whether they were like your request or, you know, the police or him before he became the officer for cannabis compliance. There's a bunch of, and you were asking for, is this good enough? And so, I think the point that I'm hearing is that initially you were told because there's a block, I've been to the store, you can't get to this back area, can't go around the counter at all, it's completely enclosed. That then you were told if this back room, that's not really accessible to anyone who's not behind the counter, was locked, that was a locked, secure room, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
So then additionally later on, and this timeline is sort of important, is you were told, but maybe not given a deadline, that there was more for you to do so that the city felt that there was more security around your cannabis products, is that correct?
Correct.
So you were told something more should be done. Maybe he suggested the cage, maybe you did, I don't know.
I suggested it.
You suggested the cage, but, and then he's like, yes, that seems like a good idea, but he didn't tell you when it
Correct.
had to be, and then you ordered it and you had a problem with it of some kind,
Correct.
which you couldn't resolve with the company that sent it to you
Correct.
for some reason for
Yeah.
months and months. What is
Correct.
that?
I never got those 90-degree, I only got 4 of those 90-degree fasteners, and that was not enough to do the metal posts on the
And
end.
why didn't that company like more quickly respond to you?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because that
I-
leaves this big space where I think the board is having sort of trouble around your intention. And they were trying to, get, I think, we're trying to get at your intention. So I don't want to go into like super gritty detail around like why Granger didn't send you the right freaking part, but like whatever.
Yeah.
But you also, it sounds like weren't in a space of, I have to get it done by a certain time, or
Correct.
that's what it sounds like you're saying. I
Correct.
don't know that the officer agrees with that, but that's what it sounds like. So you didn't really realize there was like urgency
Correct.
until he came back and said, he didn't do anything. Why didn't you do anything? Now you're in violation.
Correct.
Oh, does that help? That makes sense to you?
It makes sense, but that
Yeah,
doesn't
maybe not.
ever convince me of anything. Yes,
Absolutely. I'm just trying to like make so that like it's clear
thank you.
that there's like levels of what secure has meant over time.
But well, we can argue it. but-
I mean, again, I don't know, again, the space of this, like,
Can I ask one question
Yeah.
about that dialogue? Was there no other company that could have supplied the parts that the company you were dealing with did not have?
Correct. So this Wirecrafters cage, I only found it through Granger, so I was relying on them. It's made in Kentucky. There were numerous emails stating I'm gonna receive these parts. And so it was a kit. First of all, I ordered it as a kit. And I got these emails saying, you're gonna get these parts, this date. And then I got another email saying the date has changed. And I basically received everything in pieces. And I didn't get everything. But ultimately, I made it work by using wood and screws from Home Depot.
okay, but my last just iteration is. You weren't given a timeline that you were clear on.
Correct. Yeah, there was no,
Okay, so we might ask for some clarity from the city in that space when we're done with this process.
So, what's confusing to me is that, I mean, I understand not getting whatever pieces you needed to complete the cage. But it seems like, you know, from what we're hearing from both you and the officer, is that that was an important thing to get completed. What I'm struggling with is, why didn't you take those steps to do whatever you had to do to complete the cage, whether it's kind of jury rigging it from things from Home Depot, or, you know, getting the proper parts from the company that sent it to you, that didn't happen until the citation was issued.
so I wanted to get it done right the first time, and using steel instead of wood is the right way to do it. And I was waiting on those parts.
And it looks like, from what we see in the reports, that this cage is a subset of some sort of a storage room. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, so the cage is not, it doesn't look like it's the entire space of whatever this back room is. Is that correct?
What Officer Navon had requested was that area be further separated. And that was requested after I put the lock on the barn door. When I put the lock on the barn door, that seemed to be, him and I both seemed to be in agreement that we're resolving the issue. It was then after an email, after I installed the lock, that he said, you know what, it seems like you should do the cage too. And I began working on it. I wasn't given a deadline. I thought because I secured it with the door, the first issue that we talked about, that was good. I thought this was an extra security measure. Me as an engineer, I'm always looking to improve things, so I agree, yeah, it would be more secure to have double doors, but is it required? I didn't believe that it was required.
So when you refer to double doors, the first door is the barn door, the second door is the cage door?
Correct.
Okay, so the cage is not the entire room. The cage is a subset of the room.
Right, it's almost the entire room. It's, you go in and now you're in this little cube and you turn to the left, and now you open the other door.
Okay, and then in these photos, there's loads of other stuff. What else is stored in there?
So my buyer and supervisor work back there. Being that we're a busy shop, there's orders coming in every day. So orders come in, we bring them to that back room, and that's where we unbox everything and put it in the point of sale system. So that is a continuous process that's happening in the back room.
So like in the photos, we see all the boxes and boxes of stuff on top of, looks like cabinets. I'm not 100% sure. That's all cannabis that will be, either is or will be for sale.
Correct, and there's different areas. I mean, we have an area for expired product, which is like considered quarantine. We have areas for promotional product. Promotional product is something that the vendor wants us to include with something else to move. So everything's separated. There's also, I believe in those pictures, you're gonna see some displays that we removed from the sales area when that product sold out. And we're waiting for the vendor to take that back. Does that answer your
I
question?
think so. And then also, so you've talked a lot about this counter that prevents somebody, they would have to climb the counter really to get back there. Is it your assertion that that counter serves as securing that room?
Correct. I designed it that way so that customers don't walk behind the counter and access anything like the drawers or interfere with my bud tenders, as well as prevent the customer from accessing the back room where there's product stored.
Okay, all right, I don't have any further questions.
I do have one, and I'm gonna piggyback off of Vice Chair King. The one thing that now is coming up in my head is, when was a deadline given to you? That's the confusion. I don't see any deadline, and so the violation, in my opinion, came about without any notification of a deadline. And you did what you were supposed to do when you were issued the citation. You immediately went out and fixed the issue the best you could. And that's where I'm confused on it. And that's what I'm seeing is that you weren't given a deadline. So were you truly in violation?
And again, I'll just reiterate, like, this is a learning process that I think we established previously in terms of the city, as well as the operators and anybody in the space, because things keep changing. And so, I mean, he's giving us like what sounds like reasonable intention to be in compliance. In fact, in some ways, proactively in compliance. There's no footprint here in my mind of like him trying to like hide or not do what he's supposed to do. There's not a lot of clarity around it, and the city's learning, and there's no suggestion that the city was doing gotcha. I think Mitch just said he's learning too, and he went back and read the rules and felt like, maybe you should do more. Fair, do more, but tell him exactly what and how and when. Or he's gonna take his time because he wants to do it right. That's what I'm hearing.
Anything further?
No.
All right, at this point, we will open it up. I believe there's some member of the public that wishes to speak, and then the city will have an opportunity to respond. Thank you.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes,
we can.
So I'm set to speak. My name is Amanda Atkins. I do the administrative work for Reefer Madness as well as marketing. And I prepared a statement. So to address the back room issues, I want to say that Officer Nabam was specifically present at our original walkthrough when we opened and had zero issues with the layout of our space at the time before we even opened. And it's concerning that 2 years later, he's then taken issues with how the layout is, I guess how the present layout is. It was Stephen's suggestion to Officer Naban that we could possibly put in the cage. And then Officer Naban must have liked the idea because he mentioned it in an email to Stephen at a later time. And after that, it seemed like he kind of took that idea of Stephen's and ran with it and wanted it to be a requirement, but there was no timeline for that requirement. I helped research finding a cage for the back room and sent suggestions to Stephen. And so later when I found out he was cited for it, I was alarmed to find out something that Stephen suggested as an idea was he was fined for it. So basically Stephen was fined for his own idea, which I think is a bit ridiculous because it was his suggestion that he made to Officer Naban. The other thing that's concerning that is in that report, because I had to read over the report as I do administrative work, there was a box there checked saying that we had alcohol on premises, which to me seems like it's an additional thing kind of dirtying up the already citation that we have. The reason why this is concerning to me on many levels is because I do the hiring, I assist in the hiring and firing at our place of business. And because of a violation like that, if that is like something that would become a future violation, I would have to have fired our supervisor, Gustavo, and he's one of our exemplary employees. So because of that, I had to review 2 hours of tape, which I see Officer Naban, walking through our place of business, and an email that he sent to Stephen, because, he took pictures inside, and one of the pictures on a box, it said, Champagne Green Habitat. And so I thought, well, maybe he thought that box, was liquor. And so Stephen emailed him and said, hey, I think you've made a mistake. This is a strain of marijuana called Champagne. There's no alcohol on premises. He responded to Stephen in another email stating, no, Stephen, I specifically found liquor in a refrigerator in your back room. So that's why I was forced to review all the tape to see if that was the case. And the only thing on the tape that I see is Officer Naban going into our refrigerator in the front of our business, where we do keep THC drinks. And he takes out a THC drink and he's holding it and he walks with our supervisor into the back room and they're talking about this THC drink. It's not
Amanda, can I
alcohol.
interrupt you? Amanda, let me interrupt you. We are not here to talk about that. That is not the citation. Do you have anything further to add regarding this citation? And you've already used your 3 minutes, so please be as brief as possible.
Sure. I just want to add that I do feel that we are being, I would say, harassed with these little specific things. I understand that the alcohol is not what the violation is, but it's in his report, which is not okay. And he lied about it, which is not okay, because I would have had to fire somebody over it.
All right, thank you for your testimony. We're going to move on to the next speaker. Go ahead, sir.
Do you have another?
There's one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gustavo.
Yes, hello. Thank you
Go
for your
ahead.
time.
You have 3 minutes, please.
Okay, I just want to bring up the points that were made previously. One, when our store was opened on the first inspection and final inspection before the doors were open, we were given the okay to start business, and any separation of the rooms was not mentioned. Everything was seen as acceptable for us to start operations. It wasn't until a year and a half later that we are told that we have to have a separation, which we already did have with the barn doors. They just didn't have a lock. When my boss, Steven, was told this, he went ahead and immediately added a lock, which separates our stockroom from any access to the front. That is more than enough of a secure access location for this to be okay. However, it seems like there's this consistent accusation that the back room is also a break room. We don't have a break room back here. I work on one of the sections. My buyer worked on the other section, and there's a bathroom back here, which is only accessible to employees who are only allowed in by us or by the ones that are deemed acceptable to have a key to access this location. So at no point could the public access this location without either of us letting them in. After the final inspection where he was given the citation, Steven went ahead and even further improved his security measures by adding the cage, even though he didn't have the proper part for it. So like I mentioned, from the beginning, he was already within compliance by having the barn doors, and then he added the lock. And then on top of that, he added a cage. So
Mr. Gustavo, can I ask you, do you have anything new to add? You're just repeating his testimony.
That plus, I mean, there's also the other allegations that we brought up already regarding the
We're not here to
alcohol and all
talk
that.
about those. We're only here to
Yeah.
talk about the one citation.
Okay, then that is it.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Is there anybody else? All right, sir, it is your chance. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
The button is the bottom. Thank you. There you
For the
go.
record, my name is Steve Rosenberg. I'm a 22-year resident of Palm Springs. And I've had the privilege of serving on the Airport Commission, the Measure J Commission, and indeed on this Administrative Appeals Board. So I have a feel for how things normally go. I would tell you that the single biggest problem here is we have a moving target about what is a secure area. It keeps changing. And it's unfair to the permit holder to have this kind of rolling forward of the goalposts. In particular, the physical layout of the store is such that the sales counters, which are about this high, by the way, and that deep, would prevent anyone from getting behind the counters, and only from behind the counters could they reach the back area. That is secured with a locked door. End of story. There is no need for anything further. Stephen decided to enhance the security by within that room adding this cage. It would not be required. The fact that he decided to do it and do it in a very proper engineered sort of way, because he is a civil engineer, that's above and beyond. And yet he cited for not having it completed by a date uncertain. I think this is just grossly unfair. It's not the way things should happen here in Palm Springs. I think there's no doubt this citation needs to be overturned.
Thank you for your comments. At this time, actually, are you finished?
Well, I was gonna say, are there any questions? I'd be happy to.
No, we're not gonna ask questions to you. The appellant will have an opportunity to respond to any of that public. Basically, I think they're all repeating your testimony, so you would have 2 minutes.
I think,
You can't speak in there.
Yeah, you need to come up here and speak into the microphone, please.
I think I've pretty much covered everything. I guess if there's more questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any questions for the appellant? All right, then, at this point, the city has an opportunity to respond.
Sure, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As an initial matter, and then do you mind? The city never agreed, nor does it agree that a mere lock on a door that serves as, by the appellant's own admission, an office, storage area for other items. And he says it's not a break room. I'm not sure where their employees go during their breaks, but That's up to, for you all to infer. And that is open continuously throughout the day for reasons other than accessing the inventory. That constitutes compliance with the city's municipal code. Our municipal code, mind you, which hasn't changed. This code section wasn't recently amended. This wasn't a new one that came out of nowhere. Whoops, hey, let's look around. Oh no, maybe not compliance. I did want to address, and if this is irrelevant, feel free to interrupt me if this is not germane to your discussion, this idea that, hey, well, we may have started opening and running 2 years ago, and we were in violation the whole time. So, hey, how can you cite us now? That's simply not the way that the city operates. That in adopting the fee structure and then the citations, the city council was clear. They said, hey, we want strict enforcement similar to that of vacation rentals. In that vein, Officer Mitch, once again, in my opinion, operated extremely patiently, openly. Appellant has you believe that Officer Mitch went in there and was sneaking photos just at the right time to create this narrative that the door was open and don't worry about it. That's for you all to decide. If you think Officer Mitch went through 3 different citations, then mind you, should the city have wanted to, we could have cited him day one. Appellant says, hey, we didn't even have a door there. So if the city had an axe to grind, if Officer Mitch had an axe to grind, he would have said, hey, these are the requirements. We're not responsible for every single iota of regulatory compliance that the applicant must do. That's on the applicant. They apply for a permit as a part of that application. They sign, they say, we are familiar, we know the rules and regulations, and we will comply. Genuflecting to your idea, of course we are going to be patient. Of course, we're not going to be draconian. But once again, this is 5 months. And I will just posit that this idea that locked barn door was somehow satisfactory to this, and Officer Mitch can maybe discuss this a bit more in terms of the actual interaction between him and the business owner. I'll harken back to board member's question. If he was in compliance, why did he do this? If there was compliance, why did he go through and say, hey, I'm gonna build this? Oh, wait, now I finally get a citation. Oh, look at that. Now I can finish it. So with that, I will toss it over to Officer Mitch to provide some, if I believe that the question is that kind of unique dynamic between you and the business owner in terms of what was expected and this idea of a moving goalpost.
Correct. And to specifically address that, it's page 19 of my it's online of the staff report referencing the email that was dated February 3rd at 8:57. So this was the day after the initial baseline inspection. Right? And it just states, I went through the state's regulations, find some of the answers to some of the follow-up questions that you had. So at the end of the inspection on February 2nd, I spent over 45 minutes going through the inspection checklist with Mr. Weotic, identified the areas that were found out of compliance and provided suggestions on what the business could do to come into compliance. I didn't tell them exactly what to do. I simply told them what was required to be in compliance and provide suggestions. We don't tell businesses exactly what they need to do. It's a business decision on his part and how he needs to correct it. Towards the bottom of that email, specifically states, which was mentioned, I saw that you had installed a lock on the door into the back office / storage area. Thank you for getting that done so quickly, as that was an important fix. After going through the state's regulations, chapter 1, CCR 1500.7 discusses the requirements for inventory storage. Below are some points of importance to consider. So this is essentially where I'm detailing what the state's requirements are for an inventory storage room. A, all inventory stored on the licensed premises shall be secured in a limited access area. C, employee break rooms, changing facilities, and bathrooms shall be separated from all storage areas. And then my narrative after that, those regulations was, as you currently have it, the back office area seemed to be an all-in-one that included employee storage / lockers and a bathroom. You had mentioned the idea of installing a cage / barrier into the inventory storage space. That may be the way to go, in addition to the new lock that you just installed, to ensure that you're satisfying the requirement and creating that clear separation of areas. So my position as of February 3rd, 8:57 a.m. was that these are the requirements and this is what is needed to come into compliance. So, the statements that I was moving the goalposts, and this was an idea that was brought up by him as a suggestion for additional measures to go above and beyond is a mischaracterization. And again, the established timeline, these were, like I said, they were baseline inspections. Attorney Donegan mentioned that the city's cannabis ordinance doesn't require us to give a pre-citation or courtesy notice to businesses. If there are violations, we can simply cite at the time of the violation, similar to how we operate within the vacation rental ordinance. A verbal timeline was established with the business owner during that 45-minute discussion after the inspection, where I said, I will be back around next month. These were the items that were found to be out of compliance. Please have them corrected. If repeated items are found to be out of compliance, you will be subject to administrative citations. That was the conversation that I had. It wasn't included in an email. And again, it wasn't sent as a courtesy notice. It was a verbal discussion. And so that's all that I'll pass back over.
All right, anything? Okay, so at this point, we're gonna shift to the board to discuss. And then we'll go from there. So this is our time. So I can go first. What I'm having a hard time with is, I mean, I get that it feels like it was not a hard deadline for when these fixes needed to be fixed or completed. But what I'm struggling with is they weren't completed until there was a citation. And to me, that seems like there was an understanding from all parties, these needed to be done. But until there was a citation, it either wasn't taken seriously or didn't feel like it was something that had to be done. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, well, based on what you just said, the difference on how I see it is that they were having a series of, we'll do this, well, we're okay, but if you want, we'll do more, we'll do more, we'll do more. And then all of a sudden it was, screw you, you're dead. I don't think the dialogue went in the way that is intended. And I think it probably deserves some review at the municipal level, at the city level, to get a better system of when you make a suggestion, they do something that seems to follow through, but it's not quite good enough. And that's a moving target and not an appropriate one to cite the business.
I sort of agree with Mr. Moses.
Wow.
I've agreed with you before. I mean, I had a small business in a small area with a limited number of employees. And, we tried to segregate things, but when you have a small amount of space, space has to do double duty, unfortunately. And two, I don't understand in a cannabis store, how you can have some employees who are selling cannabis not have, I mean, you just, in a small space, you don't have enough room to have a designated person run back here to get product and come back. It just doesn't work. I also have concerns about the fact that the city issued a permit, allowed the place to open and operate for a long period of time, then all of a sudden comes in and start making rolling changes. I think that the owner of the business has tried to, I think there's strong evidence that he's tried to make the changes as the city suggested. And the one word that I'm hanging on is may. That really bothers me. Instead of you must install, you may want to do this. Well, may is you could or you could not. And that's where I'm sort of falling on the side of the business in this particular case. But I'm not, since I'm an alternate, I'm not voting.
Can I go next? I just
Sure.
thought. It wasn't until Officer Napan made the last comment And that was, I had a verbal discussion with them. I think the violation would have stood if it was in writing and the business owner had that, then there wouldn't have been a discussion. You had a deadline, we had this discussion, you didn't meet the deadline, you're in violation. And that's what I heard right at the end, and that's why I feel that the violation, in my opinion, isn't fair.
Yeah, at this point, Stephen, we're going to agree.
You're having a banner day.
I know you are, it's two of us.
I guess I don't want to see, almost, are you
I'm
done?
not done.
Sorry.
No, I think that's the flaw in the whole thing, Patrick, that
Put it there.
he in the appellate shouldn't have volunteered in the cage. I mean, he had it done, in my mind. He didn't have to do that. He may have done it, and perhaps he shouldn't have done it. So I think this is a learning curve for the city, and I think it's a learning curve for us. This is the first one of these cases we've had. So I think we'll all learn something from this, and I'm very much think that we should let this one be overturned.
Okay, two things to say. One is, I don't want anyone to suggest or feel like our decision here is any sort of indictment of the city's performance, because it's not like a win-lose. This is complicated stuff.
It's learning.
Right, absolutely, and in no way should our conversation be in any way like take the shine off Officer Mitch's performance. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing, he's doing it the way he's been shown, and he's learning as he's going, and you know, this is hard stuff to do. And the other thing is like, under advisement of the city attorney, no, I'm going to recuse from or abstain from this vote, correct?
Yeah, I'd advise Vice Chair Kane that she does not have to recuse. She does not have a financial interest in the business involved. She's not directly involved with the business. So she does not have I don't believe that she has a responsibility to recuse. She is always free to choose to abstain during a motion if she chooses. But she can participate if she wishes to.
Okay, and I just thought it was important for me to be here and Chair asked me, because I do have some familiarity with cannabis, so. I guess I was gonna put that out there.
I would just clarify that there's a difference between recusing and abstaining. In the event that you recuse, the alternate board member would participate in the vote
Okay,
and the discussion. If you abstain, it would just be. You
I'm
would be
just-
4 votes and
Got
your vote would just not count.
got it, okay, perfect.
The only thing I want to say in conclusion is that I'm very disturbed by some of the better rhetoric in the appellant's defense, using the word lies and some of the other inflammatory rhetoric, which I don't think is true. I don't think it's fair to the city to have characterized them that way, and nobody was out to get anybody. So I was very offended by that.
I would agree.
So are you abstaining or recusing?
I'm abstaining. I gotta do it until we make a motion.
I think if I can weigh in here, it's better for you to recuse so that Mr. Hedrick will then vote, as opposed to if you abstain, there was only 4 voting members.
Okay.
Yeah, had I known that your intention was to recuse, I would have advised to recuse at the beginning of the
I
conversation.
can't do that now.
Yes, I think that has already passed.
All right.
Right, the ship
All right.
sailed.
Yeah, thank
Sorry.
you. Okay,
I'd like to make a motion.
all right.
I move that we overturn the citation.
I second.
All right, Board Secretary, will you call the vote, please?
Board Member Moses,
Aye.
Board Member Sinclair,
Aye.
Board Member Vasily,
Aye.
and Chair Knappel.
Aye.
4 ayes,
And
I
one
think you have
abstain.
to call
you
me.
have to call her.
Vice Chair King. I'm abstaining. 4 yeses, 1 abstention for overturning the administrative decision.
All right. Thank you. That was,
Can we take a bathroom?
yeah, why don't we take, just a couple of minutes? And we'll come back with the next case.
We could, very. Somebody needs to help.
All right, we're gonna get started, back up. Recording is, happening. So, the next item on the agenda is item number 4. It concerns the property at 3714 Calle San Rafael. It is an appeal of the $5,000 fine, an administrative decision that, and I always apologize up front if I say your name wrong, Gia Lauren Casti is permanently ineligible to operate a vacation rental in the city of Palm Springs. Board Secretary, can you please ensure that the city staff and the appellant understand that their testimony is under oath?
We do have signed affidavits for anyone in person. Anyone on Zoom who desires to testify under this appeal hearing under the laws of perjury. If you choose to speak, you hereby accept knowledge that your testimony shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
All right, I'd like to ask for the city report, please.
Yes, good evening, thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, board members, city staff, public in the meeting this evening. My name is Patrick Clifford with the Department of Special Program Compliance, and we oversee the vacation rental program here in the city of Palm Springs. Before you this evening is a staff report for the property located at 3714 Calle San Rafael in Palm Springs. And the staff has determined that the owner has, without a registration certificate, advertised and operated the property 3714 Calle San Rafael as a vacation rental from the elements that are listed in your staff report this evening. Additionally, staff finds that the advertisement found any inquiry information from the code compliance officer was in violation of our ordinance and proceeded to issue administrative citation AB 0427. This evening, the code officer that investigated the property, Code Officer Gonzalez, is here to provide further testimony on his findings and investigation that led to the citation. I would like to invite Code Officer Gonzalez to the table.
So the officer's gonna sit there. We'll invite you back in just a moment. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board, my fellow city staff, and members of the code for being with us at tonight's hearing. My name is Jacob Gonzalez. I'm a code compliance officer in the city of Palm Springs. On November 21, 2022, while conducting a review of available rental listings on the web-based booking platform Airbnb.com, I came across an advertisement in the Demuth Park neighborhood titled La Casita Gia, a private sweet desert sanctuary, which can be found in attachment number 5 of the staff report. While reviewing the advertisement, I was unable to find the city ID number listed as required for the registered vacation rental. So I reviewed the photos contained in the ad and was able to positively identify the property as 3714 East Calle San Rafael. Upon review of the city's vacation rental registration records, I confirmed that the property identified did not hold a vacation rental registration certificate. I then sent a message via the Airbnb.com contact host feature, inquiring of a 3-night stay arriving Tuesday, December 13th, and departing Friday, December 16th. The message was, hello, I'm looking to book a family getaway for December 13th through the 16th, and possibly again in February. I was wondering if the kitchen had any cooking utensils and is close to the airport. Including the staff report in number 7. The host Gia responded to my inquiry with the following response. Hi there, we have a kitchen with everything necessary to cook a full meal, and we are about 2 minutes from the airport. And subsequently sent me an invitation to book my requested short-term stay. As a result of my findings contained in within the advertisement, the unique response to my inquiry, as well as the invitation to book the requested 4-night stay, I found that the property located in 3714 East Calle San Rafael is in violation of Palm Springs Municipal Code 5.25.040A, operating a vacation rental without a vacation rental registration certificate issued. And then I issued citation AB 0427, the property owner on the title, Gia Lauren Casti. That will conclude what I have to present. So I'll hand it back to Patrick, and I'm available to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. Additionally, I would like just to clarify in the elements that led to the citation to a review of the advertisement that was found. It does go into detail mentioning specifics of our vacation rental ordinance at the time.
ordinance 1918. And that could be found in on attachment 6, the advertisement. And that concludes our report. Thank you.
All right, anything further from the city?
Nothing further, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, we will open it up to questions for the city. Why don't we start with Vice Chair Kane?
I have a question.
Mr.
I
Sinclair?
have no questions.
Mr. Moses?
I have no question.
Mr. Vasili?
I have no questions.
So I have one. I went through this, and I think you just referenced it, Patrick. There was in the ad, there is something. I think maybe I've just found it. These pages aren't numbered, but it talks about like music. Being outside, being a violation of chapter 5.25 of the Palm Springs Municipal Code. Citations issued by the city, blah, blah, blah. So that portion of this that was pulled from the ad?
Yes, specifically in the ad, there's a section that starts right after the section during your stay. It goes into a little bit of it's like a summary, but then it says before booking, read below. By booking, the city agreed to all terms in its contract. Then it starts off saying there's a short-term vacation rental short-term agreement is made between themselves, the homeowner, and the primary guest, which further goes, which is acknowledged. The parties hereby agree as follows, and then it talks about age requirements, which is similar to our ordinance. Primary guest information.
Can you show us at least somehow where you're reading?
Yeah, of course. Let me see. I know there's not a page number. So if you see in the advertisements, there's a section where it says hosted by G in the top right corner.
Yes.
Joined in January 2013.
Yeah, but where it starts, the first line is originally from Chicago.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
On the bottom of there, it says before you start booking, read below. And then the
Okay.
next page goes in and really starts going into
It's a page after that.
yeah, it really starts talking about our city ordinance 1918 in our good neighbor brochure. So a lot of the verbiage is similar to what our ordinance is and has in place. Trying to think if there's anything more really, but it's a really detailed requirement that they read through.
Okay, and then I guess the reason I ask is that if this was in the ad is because a couple of pages beyond that, when it talks about music, it references the ordinance.
Yeah.
And but so this came from the ad. This isn't something that's just that, generic on Airbnb or anything like that.
That's correct.
Right.
No, it's interesting.
Thank you.
It's
I have
not in
one
my
more
ad.
question I forgot.
Please.
I noticed there are a bunch of other rentals, Patrick. Did they ever pay the transient occupancy tax for any of these rentals? It would be quite a number, I would guess.
No, we don't have record of the property ever having a TOT permit to be able to collect and remit to the
So the
state,
taxes have not been paid either.
from my understanding.
And again, sorry, so this says there's 294 reviews.
Yeah, like it may be two
That's correct.
properties.
Okay,
Hold on.
okay. All right, wait, you'll get your chance. You'll get your chance. Okay, all right, thank you. I have nothing further. Anybody else?
No,
Any third?
Chair, I can clarify regarding reviews.
Okay.
There's 78 reviews, I think, that are pertaining to this ad. The other reviews might be from just the host in general that might be related to.
All right. All right, thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else for the city, at this time, I'd like to open the appeal hearing. The appellant. Excuse me, the appellant is invited to speak for up to 10 minutes. Any member of the public who desires to speak on this appeal hearing shall have up to 3 minutes to speak. If a member of the public chooses to testify, the appellant will be invited to provide a rebuttal for up to 2 additional minutes. Board Secretary, could you please begin the public testimony period?
We do have signed affidavits from the,
Okay, and is it just the appellant?
as far as.
All right, great, thank you. Go ahead, ma'am, you have 10 minutes.
I'm good. Hello, members. Going to not take up too much of your time here. Clearly, I was operating without a permit, so we're going to acknowledge that that's what happened. I am more than happy to pay said fines and any additional taxes that need to be paid per the bookings that have happened. I really came here to sort of talk about the ineligibility from the short-term rental. This is a second property of mine. I am a sole provider for my mother. I'm a sole provider for my grandmother who live here. I live in Los Angeles. A lot of the revenue that comes off of here takes care of my mother's mortgage that I pay for, as well as a job for her. So I don't want to sit here and try to argue anything, rather accept my fault, pay my fines, and see if there is a way that I can be eligible to try and obtain a permit further. Simple.
All right, anything further?
No.
All right, thank you. At this time, we'll open it up for discussion. Was there no, I assume nothing more from the city?
Nothing.
Okay, thank you. So this time we'll open it up for discussion. Does anybody have any questions for the appellant first? Mr. Vasili? why don't you start with you?
Just a comment. You just said that, I'm not aware I had to obtain a permit for Airbnb, and you don't have to obtain a permit for Airbnb. You have to obtain the permit from the city of Palm Springs. So I just wanted to clarify that. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Moses, any questions for the appellant? Mr. Sinclair? Vice Chair King? I just have one. So this, all of this information, the pages and pages, were you the one that set the ad up?
No, my assistant set the ad up.
Okay, and do you know, so that person got all of this information? Well, some of it I assume might be specific to you because the introduction is probably about you. But it would seem like whoever set that up had to have done some research to know, like literally reference chapter 5.25 of the Palm Springs Code. So at some point, it seems like somebody knew there were some requirements.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I had nothing further. No questions? All right, thank you. So at this point, we'll open it up for discussion amongst the board. Why don't we start at the other end? Let's start with Vice Chair Kane.
I wish there was something to discuss, and I wish we had more discretion, and we have this conversation every single time we're here, and we don't have much discretion regardless of the circumstances, and that makes me sad.
Yeah.
But that's what I have to
Yeah,
say.
we don't have any discretion, the ordinance, we can't bifurcate it. And once liability is admitted, there's nothing we can do.
Mr. Moses?
I agree with everything you just said.
Mr. Rizzo?
I'll agree with everyone as well.
All right,
It's an unusual night.
yeah.
I agree with him.
So maybe to reiterate what you were saying is that, when an appellant says, I did this without a permit, as Vice Chair Kane was saying, we don't have the ability to choose one or the other and or. So.
But the ineligibility, where does it state that?
That is in the ordinance.
It states the $5,000 fine and the ineligibility?
Yes.
Where does it state that?
I can't tell you the lines, but it is in the ordinance.
Where?
Please.
Sure.
If appropriate, I can. It's chapter 5.25090. I'll take the subsection right now for you here. C.
And where is that?
So it's under municipal code. If you go to.
Was that always there?
Yes.
That's been in there for,
Our municipal code has been in effect, at least since 2017, with a new recent adoption in November of 2020.
What's the
to,
new recent adoption?
With changes to how many permits we can add to vacation rental neighborhoods, but the violation section did not change in this amendment.
So there's always been a $5,000 fine and permanent ineligibility.
Since 2017, to my knowledge.
Okay, well, I was not aware of that.
There was a time when this board did not enforce that, but we were criticized by the cities council by the lawyer for the city. And told we had no authority whatsoever to split the baby. It was both penalties, period.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of
And by
that.
permanent, it's 2 years.
No, that is not true.
I'm sorry.
It's permanent ineligibility.
Yeah.
Lifetime.
I've been
The
prevented
ban,
all these years.
this is
Oh, it said,
When did
different
that-
cases. When they get if they get a certain number of violations, that is a 2-year suspension.
right,
When they are renting without a permit,
oh,
that is the
okay.
fine and a permanent ineligibility of getting a
It's
permit.
been this way for quite some time, and it's this way on purpose, and it is incredibly strict. We all agree, and it's incredibly strict because this was the way in which this city could keep vacation rentals in operation. Because if this methodology wasn't that strict, we would have zero. There would have been a ban because there would have been people who would have prevailed in a number of ways. There would be no vacation rentals here. So it is super strict and we get it. You can do what's considered long-term rental, which is 29 days,
28.
28 days.
28 nights.
28, 29 days, 28 nights.
29 days or more, 28 nights or more, so 29 days or more.
You are free to do that,
Mhm.
but short term is under that number. And that's what you are ineligible to do, assuming we think about.
And
Is,
there's
uh,
absolutely no way to,
So, I guess to answer your question, if you don't like whatever the outcome is here, and we have not voted yet. Whatever the outcome is here, you can appeal it, you appeal it in the courts.
okay.
So at this point,
You're
is there a
appealing the courts, I
motion?
thought, okay.
I motion we uphold the citation.
Is there a second?
Second,
Board Secretary, can you call the vote, please?
Board Member Moses,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kane,
I,
Board Member Vasily,
Aye.
Board Member Sinclair, and Chair Pennison.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0 to adopt the resolution holding.
All right, so it was upheld. As Vice Chair Kane said, that does not prevent you from renting it by the city's definition of long-term, which is 29 days. You will get an official notification from the city. If you choose to appeal, that is your right. That would be appealed in the courts. All right, thank you, and I appreciate everyone's time and effort on this. We will move on to our next case. The next item is concerning the property at 1261 Linda Vista Drive. This is an appeal of the $5,000 fine and administrative decision that Michael Dorda, again, I apologize if I'm saying your name incorrectly, is permanently ineligible to operate a vacation rental in the city of Palm Springs. Board Secretary, could you please ensure that city staff and the appellant understand that their testimony is under oath?
We do have signed affidavits from the appellant in person. We don't have anybody on Zoom.
All right, thank you. City staff, can you present your report, please?
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, board members, city staff, and public with us this evening. My name is Patrick Clifford with the Department of Special Programs and Compliance, and we oversee the vacation rental program here in the city. Before you this evening is a staff report for the property located at 1261 Linda Vista Drive. It was found that this property was advertised and operating a vacation rental without a vacation rental registration certificate from the elements that are listed in your staff report. Additionally, there was some background on this, the staff reports. On October 13th, 2022, our office did receive a completed vacation rental application for this subject property. There was a safety inspection completed by our code compliance officer, Officer Williams, on November 2nd, 2022. And that is on attachment 5. Included in his email that is sent to the person he inspected with, there is a message that states that for new applicants, Do not advertise or rent the property short term until you receive authorization from our department. And between that time, code officer did investigate this property on December 1st, issued administrative citation AB 442 for operating vacation rental without a vacation rental certificate. The code officer that investigated the property, Officer Ingram, is here to provide further information about how the investigation went and to provide further detail. And thank you, Mr. Ingram.
Good evening, members of the board, my fellow city staff, members of the public. My name is Jonathan Ingram. I'm a code compliance officer for the city of Palm Springs. On December 12th, 2022, while conducting a search of available rental listings on the web-based booking platform Airbnb.com, I came across an advertisement in the El Mirador neighborhood titled "New Stylish House with Pool, Spa, and Huge Lot," which you can find as attachment 6 to the staff report. While reviewing the advertisement, I was unable to find the city ID number listed as required for registered vacation rentals. I reviewed the photos contained within the ads and was able to positively identify the property address as 1261 Linda Vista Road. Upon review of the city's vacation rental registration records, I confirmed that the property identified did not hold a vacation rental registration certificate. I then sent a message via Airbnb.com using the contact host feature, inquiring about a 4-night stay arriving Saturday, February 11th and departing Wednesday, February 15th. The message was, I'm looking to come out to Palm Springs for Valentine's Day, and I don't really know what the weather's like in Palm Springs in the month of February. I see you have a pool. Is it heated? I also see you have a fire pit. Is there an extra charge to run it? This is also included in the staff report as attachment 7. The host, Lauren, replied to my inquiry with the following response. But a fun trip, the pool does not have a heater, but the jacuzzi is always heated to 102 to 104 degrees. The outdoor gas pit is free to use at any time. There's also a gas fireplace inside. Please let me know if there's any questions. And subsequently, she sent me the invitation to book my requested short-term stay, as seen on page 7 and 8 of attachment 6 of the staff report. As a result of my findings contained within the advertisement, the unique response to my inquiry, as well as the invitation to book my requested 4-night short-term stay, I found the property located at 1261 Linda Vista Road in violation of PSMC 5.25.040, subsection A, operating a vacation rental without a vacation rental registration certificate, and issue citation AB 0442 to the property owner on title. This concludes my presentation. I'm handing back over to Patrick, and I'll be available for any questions. Thank you.
And I have no further comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the city staff?
Okay, can you timeline this for me, the application? Is it officer here who's doing investigations? No, there's an application when he's investigating. Or just timeline this for
Yeah,
me, so I'm
timeline.
like, who did?
Definitely. So in October, we received the application, and that's from our administrative office. Code offices are located in a separate office too. So investigations can happen separately outside of our administrative office. So it probably was not learned that this application had, or this property had an application in until we received the citation as well. Say, wait, we have this citation that's coming out, and it also has an application on file. So then we put this application on hold pending the outcome of the appeal.
So they had an application, they had an inspection. They hadn't completed, what were they missing?
It's just simply processing from staff.
Processing.
Yeah.
And they know, and I know we have had this issue before, that they're informed in a variety of ways, they can't operate until they're final.
Correct. That's correct. I believe on, if it's section C of the application, I have to go back and look at the physical application to say that no advertising operating, I believe. I can get the right verbiage. But
Yeah, we'll look it up and see,
Yeah.
hey, I think it's gonna come up, but like I remember going through this. Yeah, in detail at some point, to
Yeah, I
be
like to
really
research.
clear about the fact that, they're anxious to begin, but they have been notified and acknowledged that they can't until they can. Got it, okay.
And I'll get that verbiage for you right now on the application. Yeah, that's the verbiage that was on our big inspection list that's included in the staff report. And then as with respect to the application itself. I'm just pulling it up on our website real quick. And it does say in section C, signatures and dates. Please note, current processing time is approximately 90 days. From the day you receive your completed application, you'll be contacted by our office who will conduct an annual safety inspection. You're not authorized to advertise or otherwise operate a vacation rental until you receive specific written authorizations from DSPC, which is the Department of Special Program Compliance. Administrative fines and penalties will apply.
Okay.
Mr. Sinclair,
Nothing.
Mr. Moses,
Nothing.
Mr. Bassett.
Just a question. You said that you did this, you tried to reserve this December. Was it December?
Correct, December 12th.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I guess my only question is, so in all of the paperwork, so you're part of compliance that is separate from the office that does the application processing.
Separate, I guess you say, how we're all under the Department of Special Program Compliance now, but we have we have a code compliance department, which then handles code compliance for the entire city. We do have code officers that are specifically designated to vacation rental enforcement, just like candidates would do, where their prime directive is to really work on vacation rentals. They can do other code compliance cases as well, but yeah, we are under the one umbrella of Department of Special Program Compliance, where we have code compliance and the Department of Special Program Compliance.
Okay, and I guess my thought is, though, or question is that it doesn't really, whether they're one department or two separate departments, it doesn't really matter, because until the person has a permit, it is a violation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then, shoot, there was one other thing I was gonna ask, and then so you found this just in the normal course of your investigations, where you were finding or would have found properties that didn't have an ID, and then you investigate that property, or was this a tip?
Correct. It was just a proactive investigation.
Okay,
Just going through the web-based program, just looking at different identities.
okay, all right, thank you. I have nothing further. Any more questions for the city? All right, then I will open up the appeal hearing. The appellant is invited to speak for up to 10 minutes. Any member of the public who desires to speak on this appeal hearing, which I believe there are none, will have up to 3 minutes to speak. And if a member of the public does just testify, the appellant will be invited to provide a rebuttal for up to 2 additional minutes. Board Secretary, can you begin the public testimony period, please?
Sure, we do have a signed affidavit from both members from the appellant. All together, is that okay?
Sure, come on up. So you will have 10 minutes, not each, jointly. Please identify yourself, and then your 10 minutes will begin.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Lauren Dorda, and thank you everyone for your time tonight. Just a little bit about us. We've never owned a second property before. This was a special place for us. We got engaged here and married here, sorry. And so we have 3 young kids, and we love to come here on vacation. So anyway, this was my project, and I was the one that both printed the application, hired all the trades, met with, emailed the city, and made the mistake of advertising it too early. I included a lot of different dates in the packet that I provided to you. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm going to go through it, just kind of some of the highlights, so that we don't take up too much time. So I actually printed the application back in July and filled it out. There were a lot of things that I needed to deal with. I had to hire an electrician to deal with different things around the pool. I actually went to the city to get a permit to have the pool drained a few feet so that he could access the light and then refill it. I had to work with our homeowners insurance company to deal with the HVAC. There were a lot of kind of important time-oriented things that I needed to do. So I worked through all those projects. I finally had the application time-stamped October 13th. I wasn't sure if I would have the inspection on November 2nd or not. I watched the entire city council meeting on the 17th, and I wasn't sure what the future of short-term rentals were. I was trying to educate myself, but obviously I missed something very important. So the inspector came on November 2nd. David Williams was very professional, and he took the time to tell me, okay, you passed your inspection, but make sure you do not do any short-term rentals until you get your permit, which is January 13th. And I said, oh, wow, that's really far in the future. It's only November 2nd today. And he said, yes, with the moratorium, it can take up to 90 days. Make sure you do not do any short-term rentals until January 13th. So that's the phrase that I had stuck in my head. That coupled with, we've been working with our realtor, who's a good friend, and he's been giving us advice along the way. He has a short-term rental that he got his permit like 4 years ago, when the process was much faster and different. And I should not have just relied on what he was telling me, but I just trust him a lot. And so he said, great, you got that done, you know, keep getting things squared away, get your listing started, make sure you only do long-term rentals before the date that you get your permit, and have it listed for short-term rentals after that date. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll move forward with that. So I had to get a photographer, and I included a receipt that he came on the 11th, and then I worked on the listing more. I published it. It might have been briefly published on the 12th. I'm not sure what day he saw it, but I wasn't understanding the back end. And so I had to call Airbnb and ask them how to unpublish it. And I finished it, and I intentionally published it on the 15th. It was very obvious that I published it. I wasn't trying to be sneaky. I even put new with stars next to it because I heard that that was a good thing to do. I even dropped the pin exactly on my property ID. I didn't put it in the vicinity, which a lot of people choose to do. I just made it very clear this was my property. I thought I was doing everything properly. I received bookings over the next few weeks until I got the citation. I was shocked when I got the citation. I immediately went in and blocked all my dates. I set the minimum stay to 60 days. I worked with Airbnb to cancel. There were 7 future bookings. I canceled them. I apologized to them. I made sure that they were going to get a new rental. And I even provided you guys with my login information if you want to look at the conversations or you know, any of the details about the cancellations. We haven't hosted anyone. We haven't taken $1. We haven't skipped out on any taxes. We don't have any reviews. All I did was advertise. And it's like the biggest mistake I've ever made. Because I try to do a good job on things. Anyway, I'm gonna let my husband finish.
Thank you. Thank you to Chair, Vice Chair, and board members and the city attorney and city staff. My name is Michael Dorda, and I'm in violation of section 525. This is a 90D of the Palm Springs Municipal Code. Please find me and withhold our certification for 6 months as stated in that section. I'm a licensed professional engineer with Los Angeles County Public Works. I have over 19 years of experience in building and safety. I'm a district office manager over multiple offices and serve as building official for the contract cities of Rolling Hills, Lomita, and Carson. Interpreting building laws and helping the public at large is my job and my passion. Building codes change every 3 years. I assist the county and cities adopt new ordinances and codes. I play a large role in reviewing city codes and revising ordinances. Sorry, I'm trying to move quickly because I know there's 10 minutes. When we received the citation in our home at 1261 Linda Vista, we were shocked. We never rented our property. We had no intention of using it as a short-term rental without a certificate. I referred immediately to the Palm Springs Code to determine why we were being cited. Based on the city citation, we are being cited, or we are being violated, we are cited for violating code section 525-40A, the operation of a vacation rental without a vacation rental registration certificate. And the penalty per section 525-90C is $5,000 and permanent ineligibility. As my wife outlined, we did not rent or operate our property. We advertised it for vacation rentals after January 13th this year. And as a code official, I understand the importance of definitions in the code. I was extremely surprised to find that there was no codified definition of operation in the code. In building codes, if there's no codified definition, one refers to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. The relevant definition of operation is as follows: a business transaction, especially when speculative. We didn't rent our property and we didn't receive payments. Therefore, there was no transaction or operation as a rental. We advertised our property as a vacation rental strictly for dates after our scheduled certificate. Because we didn't operate a vacation rental, we are being cited for something we did not do, and the penalty being applied to us does not fit our mistake. Understandably, the code must include a strict penalty for property owners who operate rentals without a certificate. But to say we actively rented our home is false, given that no financial transaction or rental stay ever occurred. In our uncommon case, then, permanent ineligibility is egregious and should not be applicable. We are not innocent in violating the city's code, however. That's obvious. I discovered we are in violation by advertising our home without posting a certificate. Section 52590D states that you can't advertise a vacation rental without including the certificate in any advertising, and the fine is $2,500 and a 6-month suspension. Now, Code Section 52570T allows the city manager to have the authority to establish administrative rules and regulations. Hence the document titled Vacation Rental Administrative Regulations, where Assistant City Manager Marcus Fuller expanded the definition of operation of a vacation rental in September 2017. This document inflated the definition of operation to include advertising. This document will be the lone reference presented by the city to misclassify our offense. This document was extremely clear. In quotes, this regulation is issued as an interim matter. The issue addressed pursuant to this regulation will be the subject of an amendment to Chapter 525 this calendar year. That was end quote, and that was 2017. Here we are, 5.5, 6 years later, and this regulation was never subject to a public notice or a public hearing, and was never adopted into the city's code. The 2017 regulation itself was labeled as interim and intended to expire the same calendar year by virtue of replacement through adoption. Officially adopting a definition for operation would be consistent with the California Office of Administrative Law, which requires that every administrative regulation be subject to a timely public hearing and adopted into code. Therefore, for the city to rely on this outdated regulation appears unenforceable. The city's temporary definition of operation grossly expands the plain meaning of the word. Without the 2017 admin reg, the city's code would correctly punish anyone in our circumstance with a 6-month suspension for advertising. I love municipal codes and I rely on them daily. So I respect and appreciate what all of you do to uphold and interpret the city's code. But in our case differs from most. We are being cited incorrectly and being treated unfairly and unlawfully for the following reasons. We rented our property, we never rented our property, received any income from such a rental, or allowed anyone to stay at our house. We advertised our property as vacation rental for 13 days and never advertised it for dates prior to January 13th, 2023, when we were to receive our certificate. We never intended to nor plan to operate without a certificate, as potential short-term renters would arrive and pay well after January 13th, when we were to receive our certificate. We never functioned or performed as defined a vacation rental. The definition of operation of a vacation rental has been unilaterally manipulated and overreaches to include advertising and was intended to expire at the end of the 2017 calendar year. There are exactly 13 administrative regulations to date posted on the city's website. Every one of them was signed by the city manager at the time, as code requires in 52570T. Except for one regulation. This is the regulation defining operation. This regulation was incorrectly signed by the assistant city manager. Lastly, our home doesn't even meet the definition of a vacation rental in section 52530, which states that such a property is utilized, in quotes, utilized for occupancy
I don't know the resolution, so I'm gonna ask the city attorney when I think it's appropriate, and once again, these questions for you, but I think the nerdiness code like you.
Mr.
I
Sinclair.
think the city attorney needs to give us an interpretation.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific items that you want
Is he right or is he wrong
about which?
about the vacation rental,
Operate.
advertising part
The
not being enforced?
Well, the issue of operation, I think I said, is idea that, and this may not be something we can work out this evening either.
So let's do this.
Let's talk
This
about
time,
this, yeah.
is our time to ask the appellants questions.
Yeah.
The city has a opportunity to add comments, and that would be a time for
It's
them.
not the city.
Pardon me?
He is to say.
He is the city. Do you have any questions for the appellants?
No,
All right, Mr. Moses.
No,
No.
Mr. Vasili. I actually don't think I do either, on the rare occasion. I know, it might be the first time.
Sorry, can I just say one other thing I forgot?
Certainly.
It was included in one of the screen captures, but where you see all the cancellations, the first booking or the first in the calendar was January 27th. And had there been a problem with the permit, I didn't want to bother the city because I knew how busy they were with all these permits that have come in, but I was planning to check in with them like around the new year. And had there been a problem with our permit, it was going to be extended. I would have moved dates back, or I would have canceled as I needed to. But anyway, the first date that was coming in was the 27th, which we were supposed to get our permit on the 13th. I understand.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. So at this point, if the city has any additional comments in response to the appellant's testimony, and then if you want to address Vice Chair Kane or Mr. Sinclair's question about the appellant's interpretation of the ordinance.
Yes, thanks, Chair. When it comes to interpretation, I think I might lean to the city attorney regarding, because these are important, information that was provided. I could speak to the admin regs. There are roughly 13, I think, on our website that we have that were created back between 2017 and maybe 2019 to help interpret the ordinance at that time. It does say it's an interim matter, from my understanding that maybe at that point there was a look to have the ordinance revision within a reasonable time. As we all know, there was litigation that helped stop the city looking into maybe clarifying that. Does that bear, what the city attorney might interpret? I don't know, but that's the history that I understand. If maybe trying to provide why it wasn't done in 2018. It's possibly because we didn't have a chance to look at the ordinance at that time because of ongoing litigation. So.
All right, it's you.
Okay, so what I will do is I will give you an interpretation of the codes as I see them, and you can let me know if you have any further questions for me that would help you guide you in making a decision. So section 5.25.040A prohibits the operation of vacation rental without a certificate. Operation in that section is not defined. And there I reviewed also section 5.25.030, which offers the definitions for the general chapter 5.25 related to vacation rentals, and that does not include a definition for operation. Similarly, section 5.25.090C makes it a violation to operate a vacation rental without a certificate and imposes, the payment of taxes, the payment of the $5,000 fine for the first penalty, and the permanent ineligibility. Again, operates is not defined in that section. Section 5.25.070T does allow, as stated by the applicant, by the appellant. And I want to be clear on the language here, because I think you all will probably determine your decision based on the language of the code. And what it says specifically is that the city manager shall have the authority to establish administrative rules and regulations, which may include but are not limited to registration conditions, reporting requirements, inspection frequencies, enforcement procedures, advertising restrictions, disclosure requirements, or insurance requirements consistent with the provisions of this chapter for the purpose of implementing, interpreting, clarifying, carrying out, furthering, and enforcing the requirements and provisions of this chapter. No person shall fail to comply with any such regulation. A copy of such administrative rules and regulations shall be on file in the office of the city clerk. So it appears from this section of the code that the city manager is directly authorized by the city council to impose these regulations. And it appears that individuals do have noticed that these rules and regulations exist and should be reviewed for compliance. Another issue raised by the appellant, however, which I think is a decision for the board to make, is that the appellant raises the concern that the specific administrative regulation that does define operation for purposes of chapter 5.25 is an administrative regulation issued in 2017. And specifically, the appellant raises for the board a consideration of whether it appears to me that the appellant is raising a consideration for the board of whether this regulation was properly issued and is therefore effective. And the main concern appears to be that this regulation was not signed or issued by the city manager. It is signed as approved by the assistant city manager and approved as a form by the city attorney. I do not know at that time the city attorney, why this was approved as to the form of the regulation, or whether they were aware that the assistant city manager would be signing it as opposed to the city manager. I can say that the code does expressly reference the city manager. I checked the code to determine whether the code specifically allows a designate from the city manager. It appears that there are some sections of the code that do reference city manager designates. For example, section 5.25.07 R says a list of such additional standard conditions shall be maintained on file with the office of city clerks and such offices as the city manager designates. We do see that in some instances, you see in the code set areas where, it could say the city manager or his or her designee can issue regulations. That's not the language here. So I think it's for the board to consider whether the regulation at issue, whether you believe the regulation at issue that defines operation as including advertisement applies or not, and whether it will uphold the violation based on that.
Patrick, this might be for you. I think we've always operated under the understanding that the city defined operating as either renting and or advertising.
And that's correct, with the support of that admin regulation.
Okay. And it's looking at, as part of the report here, the safety inspection actually says, important message for new applicants: do not advertise or rent your property until you have received written authorization from the Department of Special Program Compliance. Then it goes on.
May I say something about that?
Sure.
I did get an email after he visited, very soon after, and I saw the top part of it. I showed a screen capture of, congratulations, and I unfortunately just didn't, God, I wish anything that I could have read. I read through the application over again when I was making the listing to make sure how many daytime guests, how many nighttime guests, how many children, how many cars. I kept referencing things and I missed it. And I know it was at the bottom of the email, and I just opened and I looked at the top of the email.
Okay. And then Patrick, one last question, I guess, for you. In that checklist that we have seen a variety of times, is there not where the applicant has to initial, I don't know if it's a dozen or 15, whatever, items? Is there not verbiage in there about advertising?
You know, Chair, I'd have to look at those initial parts of that application. If you want, I can pull that up from there.
There is.
There.
I initialed it back in early July. I initialed, however many pages it is, and I was focused on all the things I had to do, people I had to hire, and it just didn't sink in. I mean, I wish. I wasn't trying to do anything sneaky.
I guess what I'm getting at is that there are places in the paperwork and the responses that talk about advertising.
See right here where the initials are.
My hearing from council that we have the ability to find in favor of the appellant.
I cannot, you always have the ability to vote whichever way you would like to vote. Yeah, you'd like to clarify what you mean by that question. I can further respond.
Clarify what?
You want to clarify what you mean by your question?
Well,
We can
I
overturn
heard some
or not.
language in your description, which would not necessarily have imposed a lifetime ban and a $5,000 fine for advertising only.
The concern that the appellant raised is that operation is not defined within the code. What you would, in order to uphold the citation, what the board would be analyzing is, have they operated a vacation rental without a certificate? The issue here is that they admit that they advertised the property as a vacation rental, but they did not actually rent or operate it in a colloquial sense of the word. Because the code does not define operate, then we turn to the administrative regulation that was issued in 2017, which does define operate as including the advertisement of a vacation rental. What complicates matters further is that the appellant has raised an issue of the validity of that administrative regulation because it was issued by the assistant city manager as opposed to the city manager. What I have advised you is that the code section does state that the city manager is authorized to issue regulation. It is a matter for the board to decide whether in light of the administrative regulation and who signed the administrative regulation, whether you would interpret operates as including an advertisement or not.
Hi, this is Veronica. I had something I wanted to add to this discussion.
Thank you. ahead,
I worked in the city attorney's office at the time that this regulation, the admin regulation, was drafted and signed by Marcus. The reason it was signed by the assistant city director is because David was on vacation and Marcus was designated to sign during that time. So he was authorized to sign. It wasn't that he signed it so it would not be effective. It was because David was not in town at that time, and it was necessary due to the number of people who were continuing to advertise without permits and without any city authorization.
All right.
Am I able to?
Briefly, yes.
All right, thank you. The city attorney said everything perfectly. There's one other thing that that's very important is that regulation said that it would be subject to an amendment to the code later that calendar year. And that was in
Correct.
2017.
Yes, you are correct. However, the entire ordinance was supposed to be reviewed in the year, and that was delayed. It was not reviewed until this past year. There were multiple reasons for the delay, including the move of in-house counsel back to outside counsel, as well as the COVID pandemic, which put things on pause. So the revisions were just recently done, and that admin reg will be incorporated when we do our last cleanup of the ordinance.
Well, it'll be subject to public hearing, right, and public notice if it's gonna be
We will
adopted
be-
into the code.
it will be noticed, correct, but it is currently in effect.
Who is the voice?
That's Veronica.
That's Veronica.
Yeah.
Hi, Veronica.
She's the, I believe the director of that department. All right, any other questions? All right, so, at this time, we'll close the public testimony period and we'll open it up for board member discussion. So, all right, I'll go first. The appellant raises some interesting points. However, we have been through hundreds of cases like this. At no point have we ever questioned the validity of the rule because it was signed by the assistant city manager. I would imagine that there are times that the assistant city manager signs things, whether it was the city manager being on vacation or when the last city manager left and we have an interim city manager. That doesn't make, in my mind, that doesn't make those regulations invalid. I think council has explained to us that the ordinance does, in one portion of it, define operation as advertising. That is a component.
No, admin rules do, the ordinance does not.
Yeah, to be clear, the definition for operation that includes advertisement is in the administrative regulation.
Okay. All right, but I guess my point is that is in there. And that has been the standard for years. Both for the department as well as this board. So please.
So it doesn't mean that if we decided to, is on further research, we've been wrong. We should continue to be wrong. I'm inclined to go back to I'm inclined to say that these facts do not indicate operation, period. I would limit our decision. These facts do not, under the law, under the statute, whatever's ordinance, do not in fact constitute a violation.
So I think I'm in disagreement with you because it sounds like I get my wording right. The city manager or assistant city manager in this case is clarification is defining it as advertising.
Well, the assistant city manager, no, that's the failure of it to be signed by the city manager and being signed instead by Marcus Fuller. That's not the issue.
I agree.
Okay, so put that one aside. The issue seems to be that as written, including the definition of operation, minimal advertising, certain facts might not yet constitute operation. And these facts are about as minimal as you can get. And I would be inclined to say, to vote that they did not operate the project. The plaintiffs or the appellants in this case did, without making a more general rule, just on the facts that we've been given today, there was no operation.
Please weigh in.
Well, sorry. I was just, I guess the idea here is not to precedent set. And then I would suggest that we haven't had hundreds of cases with this fact pattern, frankly. There are hundreds of cases with people advertising with no applications in process. I don't know how many we've had with applications in process, but this is a tiny little window. And Marcus Fuller aside, you're a smart cookie, but admin rules are admin rules, and we obviously should, get clarity from Veronica around when the ordinance cleanup is going to happen, and that fix this hole that we seem to find ourselves in, but I would suggest that we haven't seen this fact pattern.
Yeah, my question to Veronica is, was the hole filled in January of 2022, Veronica?
No, no. She said no.
She said no.
I'm sorry, can you
Are you-
repeat that question?
Was the hole filled in January of 2022?
No, it was brought up, but due to other discussion, this is going to be part of our cleanup that we'll be bringing forth soon. But the admin reg is still in effect until it's codified.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
Could you say that again, Veronica, please? The admin of,
The admin reg is still in effect. We never, I mean, like I mentioned before, the intent was to review the entire ordinance in that year. However, due to delays, we did not do so until recently, until this most recent ordinance revision. These admin regs were to be incorporated at that time, but due to the discussion going long at the meeting, it will be part of our cleanup, but the reg is still in effect.
I've never practiced administrative law. The regulations go into effect before they're approved by the governing body.
This one was approved.
Sorry, I misinterpreted that as a question. Is that a question for council? Question?
Whoever can answer it.
My advice to the board would be that that the city council in its ordinance has authorized the city manager to issue regulations. If the city manager issues a regulation, the regulation would be effective. It doesn't matter that it was not cleaned up or not.
Yeah. Like I said,
What
I
the
never
appellant
practiced.
has raised is whether the regulation was issued effectively, appropriately to begin with. That's a matter for the board to consider.
and the variable there is,
The variable would be that if you determine that the regulation is not effective because it was not issued properly, then the definition of the definition of operation would not, that's in the administrative regulation, would not be the definition that you would be bound by. It would be your determination whether they have operated or not.
For this case alone.
For this case alone, until the administrative regulation is issued again or.
Well, I tend to agree with our sidebar here that this may have been sloppy, but I think it's okay. The way it was done has been sloppy, but I think it's in effect.
put that differently, so I understand what you're saying, that the way the city may have done it was sloppy, but the rule is in effect.
Yes.
I agree with you.
Does council
I
agree?
agree as well.
All right,
Wait, does council agree?
He doesn't, he's not.
he's not gonna say that he thinks it was done sloppy.
No, that's okay, but that the rule, do you believe the rule, one way or another, the rule has been in effect? We've certainly enforced that rule a number of times.
Yeah, all I can do is reiterate what I have said, which is that the code authorizes the city manager to issue administrative regulations. The fact is that this regulation was signed by the assistant city manager. It's your determination whether that is in compliance with the code or not, and therefore whether the administrative regulation applies.
The assistant city manager is not the issue. Was in fact the definition codified?
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry, I'm failing to understand.
Let me try this. So what he's telling us is the ordinance says the city manager can create definitions. The city manager did create a definition.
Well, that's the question. Did he create this definition or not?
This administrative regulation was issued by the assistant city manager.
Yeah.
But never adopted into the code. It was never code.
And never.
But I think what we're hearing is that it didn't have to be. The city council in the ordinance authorized the city manager to create guidelines, rules, definitions. That's what the city manager did.
And in this regulation, it was set to expire at the end of that year.
Well, that may be, but the city was in a lawsuit. They could not amend the ordinance up until last year. So that doesn't mean that it just expired. in my mind. So, all right, if there are no more questions or comments, discussion comments, do we have a motion?
Well, are we authorized to put this off a month and get a tougher, better look at was in fact the rule in place?
So what he's suggesting is that we don't vote on it tonight, that we postpone the vote until our next meeting with advice from the city council on definitively, before we vote, is that rule or definition, does it stand?
That's correct.
And then I guess the other part is that, do you want to vote tonight, or would you choose to allow us to postpone the vote till the next meeting?
I would certainly allow you, anyone more time to make sure, it gets right. Or it's, you look at it and you make sure everything is done properly. We're not. Yeah, that's fine.
If you're looking for a more definitive answer from council, my determination would be that this regulation was not issued by the city manager, it was issued by the city manager. We could have more time to look at whether that constitutes, sufficient, whether that was sufficient under the code. That's what I'm not confident. I would not tell you one way or another at this time. So that's what I'm happy to look into and issue advice on that specific matter. That's what I tell you. Yeah.
All right. From my standpoint, the fact of whether it was the city manager or the assistant city manager makes no difference to me.
No,
They
that's
are-
not the issue.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is, we're asking him to tell us, does this stand because it was signed by the
Not
assistant?
because it was signed by Marcus Fuller. No, the fact is, if it was signed by Marcus Fuller when, what's his name was on some
Vacation.
kind of vacation, that's perfectly acceptable.
Mhm. I agree.
The question is, was that specific portion of the rules for this particular legislation, that is, that advertising is part of operation. If that was questionable, the question is, was it in place or not? However, whether Marcus Fuller or somebody else, was the law as in place at that point in time? Did it include in the definition of operation advertising solely?
That question I can answer at this time. Yes, the regulation as written does define operation as including advertisement. It specifically says that advertisement of the property means on any web-based advertising, posting platform, print media, bulletin, signage, radio, and television, or on any other medium for purposes of promoting interest in, testing the market for, or soliciting the occupancy of a property for a period of 28 days, consecutive days or less. So it does, the administrative regulation as written does include advertising, if that's your question.
And was it adopted?
No.
What?
Yes, it was. The code said the city manager can do that. The city manager did that. So yes.
It's not a question. The question is, did the city manager ever do it?
He just read it to us. Yes, the administrative definition, rules, however you want to describe it, was issued.
And what did you read that from? What was that?
The administrative regulation was issued by the assistant city manager.
Okay. And then it applies. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
All right, do we have a motion
I'll move with all of them.
and a second? I will second it. City Secretary, can you call the vote, please?
Board Member Moses,
Aye.
Chair Panessa,
Aye.
Board Member Basili,
It's a hard one. Aye, I guess so.
Board Member Sinclair,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kane,
No,
Motion carries 4-1 to uphold the citation.
So what that means, you will get an official notification from the city. What that means is we upheld the fine and the ban. That does not stop you from renting on a long-term basis. The city defines that as 29 days. All right, we are going to move on. Thank you, everyone, for your time and effort on this case. Next item on the agenda is set aside for general comments, announcements, requests of staff and or other issues of concern from members of the Administrative Appeals Board. I believe you have one.
I think it might be an appropriate time for us to suggest to the city council that what we've just been discussing here, the lifetime bar and all that, is hard, is intentionally hard. It's now been a couple of years, and every one of the people penalized is in fact a citizen of and property owner of this city. And maybe we owe it at this point to say, okay, that penalty has been eliminated. No, the fine you paid is a fine you paid, but you are no longer barred from doing short-term rentals.
I would say that, yes, there should be some discussion around this, but the fact patterns need to support that kind of restraint. I don't wanna say it's never on the table, but I do wanna say that certain fact patterns are gonna sort of imply more nefarious outcomes than others, if you will.
And that, what I would say is that, and then I don't think I'll ever go for that, Stephen, first of all. However, it would be nice, and I don't think I'll go for this either, for we be able to be determined, perhaps in a certain set of parameters, how long that vacation rental ban should be. I mean, we've had one where the person completely ignored us, violated, hadn't taken to court because they ignored our ban. They should be banned. On the other hand, if we can determine that someone really made a mistake and did something stupid, like in this case, these were nice people. And that has nothing to do with the case, but I don't think a lifetime ban in this case is a good thing. And I think that if we could, make it 3-6 month, just discretion, to maybe be a little lenient would be my solution to the whole thing if I had my brother.
So I think I understand what you're proposing. My fear is you put us in a situation where somebody is more sympathetic, they get a shorter ban than somebody who's less sympathetic. And I think that puts us as a board in a very dangerous position. The city wrote this as harsh as they did for a reason, to get people to stop doing this without a permit. It was intended to be harsh, and it is. There is no question about that. But what I don't like or want to see is where we start, oh, they're nice, and I'm not singling you out here, that they're nice people, or they're very sympathetic, or if somebody cries, or when somebody shows up with a baby in their arms, we get more sympathetic.
We've done all.
And we have, and I don't want us going down that.
Let me make a further suggestion.
Okay.
I just brought that up tonight. It doesn't have to be decided tonight. Let's sleep on it till the next meeting and decide if we want to recommend it to city council or not.
Yeah, I think if the city council really had their druthers, they banned short-term rentals.
I think you're right. I think you're right. One of my things was, I think from what we learned tonight especially with the first case, is that I think, and again, I'm not wanting to single out anybody. I think the city does a great job at what they do, is that almost like the city needs to be a little more harsh to say, if you need to do something, you need to do it by X date, so that there can be no question that, there was not an understanding that I had to or didn't have to, whatever. But I feel like I want to see the city be more explicit and I don't want to say harsher, but
No,
a
it's
little
just-
harsher.
It's bright lines.
Yeah.
That's all, and
Yeah.
I think that small business people appreciate bright lines,
Mhm.
because they can know whether they're in compliance or not in
Yeah.
compliance, and I completely agree with that, and I surely think that Patrick has heard this from us in many ways, not just with cannabis, certainly with vacation rental as well. But I do think there's more to discuss in terms of like, the penalties and our discretion. Being a board of appeals, the purpose of it, right, is to take fact patterns into consideration and have some field discretion and know the history. I've been around this long enough to know that we have very little, and there's reason for that, given the fact that it was a run to get rid of this board in total. So we need to be mindful, right, of all of that, but ask that we have maybe some more control, and that our findings are like as important as the code, if that makes sense, like we can do something that seems like out of line with what we've been doing, but because we can support it with findings, we should feel comfortable doing it, not terrified that we are going to set a precedent forever and go away.
Yeah, we've never been cavalier. We've always been thoughtful, I think.
I
And we
agree.
really have 29 cannabis shops in this town.
We do, you bet your ass we do.
Really?
Do we have what?
29, actually, there's
34.
34
We do.
cannabis dispensaries.
No,
We have a
who
lot of.
said that?
That was that was a question.
That's a no.
Back to this issue for 1 second. Let's remember that the environment when this law was adopted was that there was a motion going through the city, initiative to try to create by signature a law that would have banned short-term rentals altogether. That mood has changed.
Yeah.
And the city council component has changed.
Maybe. We don't know
So-
that.
Well,
We don't know, we can't be sure that tomorrow there won't be another run at vacation
we
rentals,
can't be sure of anything in the future,
right?
but the city council has different members today than it had then.
But we have to do, and you're absolutely right, but we have to do what we do based on the way it is today.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying that we should change anything. I'm saying that we suggest city council that they reconsider the harshness of this legislation.
Okay.
And I think you're right on that. But I think when I came into this, my understanding was I was gonna follow the rules of this, the city guidelines, sorry. And that we're not in the position of negotiating. Oh, we'll give you 2 months, we'll give you 6 months. We've got a set of guidelines. We agreed that we were gonna follow them. I think we can suggest things. Coming from a city of Sedona, Arizona, I see how rentals destroyed the city. It just overran. And if the city, the biggest problem the city did was if you violated, you got a $200 fine. Well, you're renting the property for $450 a night. Who cares? So I think there's a positive side of this. It's, and I understand even these folks tonight, I get it. But the thing is you sign a contract, you sign an agreement. If you don't read it, it's your fault. That's the bottom line. You've got to pay attention. And I understand. I mean, we've all bought properties and no one reads the contracts and until all of a sudden you need something and they're like, well, page 15, section 2, you should have read it. And same with HOA documents. We never read it until we ask for something, find out we can't have it. So I think in one aspect, I think the city's doing a good job because they're keeping the city it's keeping the city's integrity going. Otherwise, this could be overrun by rentals. And that means absentee landlords, a lot of problems. And, on the other hand, I understand the city's making money off of it, which is great. But you can't penalize the residents because the city wants to make money. We have to work together on this. So I say we just go to the city and raise hell. We're not going to do it anymore.
All right, any other comments, requests for the staff? All right, we need to approve last month's meetings.
So moved.
The minutes.
Minutes.
So moved.
Sorry.
I assume.
Second.
And I think you have it listed, so you need to call a vote.
Sure do. Board Member St. Clair,
Aye.
Vice Chair King,
Aye.
Board Member Vasili,
Aye.
Board Member Moses,
Aye.
and Chair Pennison.
All right.
Passes 5-0.
Since I was late.
All right, next item is time set aside for the city attorney to update the board on important matters initiated by the staff or previously requested by the board.
Yeah, the only update I have is that at the last meeting, Board Member Moses requested another legal opinion with respect to whether, whether a rental by a renter of a property as opposed to the landlord or the owner of the property would constitute a violation. I did prepare that memo. I would like it reviewed by the city attorney first, so I will distribute that as soon as I can get that to happen, and hopefully in advance of the next meeting in case that issue arises again.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, last item on the agenda is set aside Cassandra.
The only thing that I have is the next meeting will possibly be on Zoom because we're at the same time as planning commission. And also there's a meeting prior to this one, so it might overlap. So I'll send out notices next week and let everybody know.
Okay,
You're on hands.
I can, yeah, I can, you know, otherwise.
all right.
Ban the planning commission.
Don't ask.
All right, without objection, we are adjourned.
We gave them a lot of high hopes.